Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3561, The Black Sun. Sawyer and Thurston had not been born on the other shore, rather, they came from the chaos. The Nodding race was the ruling civilization of the 733rd chaos. Sawyer and Thurston were the most capable assistants of the strongest warrior in the Nodding race. As King Yayan had said, the Nodding race was known for the courage of its members. In the quest to achieve the finale way, many members of the Nodding race had been killed as blood sacrifices. But it was all in vain. The strongest warrior had still failed, and could only lead the remaining members to the other shore. However, even on the other shore, the Nodding race still advocated the finale way. This put them at odds with the element spirit civilization. Eventually, the strongest warrior of the Nodding race was killed by the Ice Spirit, along with almost all the other members of the race. Only Sawyer and his brother Thurston had survived. Like all the members of the Nodding race, the two brothers used to have a deep obsession with the finale way. But after they became eternal realm hunters, they gradually began to give up on achieving it. Now, after long years of staying in the Three Purities stage, they never mentioned the finale way anymore. King Yayan suddenly said something that immediately caught their attention. It told them that they could realize the finale way. Sawyer looked at first shocked, then he smirked as though he'd heard a funny joke. So, you are the creatures in the current chaos? Thurston asked. Yes, said King Yayan. This round of chaos is about to come to an end soon. I wonder whether you have been fully prepared, and how strong the strongest of you truly is, said Sawyer in a mocking tone. King Yayan pondered this for a few moments. Then it shook its head. I don't know. Sawyer let out a sharp bark of laughter. Since going to the Supreme Pure Realm, we have paid little attention to what is happening in the chaos, but we know clearly that there is no ruling force in this round, he said. What makes you think you can realize the finale way? There were many preparations needed in order to complete the finale way. A ruling civilization established its dominion and ensured that no other force in the chaos could resist it. This allowed the members of that civilization to focus on preparing for the completion of the finale way. Now, however, the various super forces in the chaos were fighting each other. How could anyone have the time to prepare for the finale way? Sawyer's question left King Yayan speechless. It quickly realized that Sawyer was right. So far, almost no preparations had been made for the finale way. How could they complete it? The snake goddess listened calmly from where she stood on the vine. Something flickered in her eyes as she said, although our human race is not a ruling force, we have killed Claire from the element spirit civilization and the Grand Master of Heaven from the Nihility race. Her words surprised Sawyer, Thurston, and Pearson greatly. Both Claire and the Grand Master of Heaven were top masters on the other shore. Had the members of the human race truly defeated them? What great abilities did they possess to accomplish such feats? Sawyer sneered. In a tone of skepticism, he said, do you have any proof? Are we supposed to simply believe your claims? It was hard to fathom the truth of what the snake goddess said, since they had not seen Claire or the Grand Master of Heaven defeated with their own eyes. Why else do you think is the element spirit civilization so determined to kill us? Even at the cost of the bone fragment's secret soul? The snake goddess asked coolly. Sawyer hesitated, exchanging glances with Thurston. The brothers realized that what the snake goddess said made sense. In the eyes of the three eternal realm hunters, this task was extremely simple. Zen was obviously the most powerful in his group. The element spirit civilization had used the ice piece to pass its orders and tasks to other creatures. Somehow, the eternal realm hunters had managed to get their hands on an ice piece, through which they received the current task. They then conducted an investigation and learned that Zen had massive physical strength, and that he had killed Holly in the flaming maple forest. Thus, based on what the eternal realm hunters knew about the flaming maple forest, Zen had a stronger body than Holly. However, the eternal realm hunters weren't afraid of a powerful body or physical strength alone. Without the suppression of the flaming maple forest, they thought it would not be difficult for them to kill Zen using their thurgies. The task proved as simple as they had anticipated. Zen had no time to fight back before he fell into the black sun of Sawyer and Thurston. But why did the element spirit civilization have to chase after this human team? They had offered the bone fragment's secret soul as a reward. They had mobilized almost all the creatures in the Grand Pure Realm. Clearly, the element spirit civilization was determined to kill these humans. You want us to let you go, right? It's impossible. We'll kill you. With an audible hiss, the spider threads spread out over the humans. The threads enveloped Fuxi, the snake goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others. Eastern Emperor Tai saw that battle was unavoidable, and his eyes began to flash with a deep golden light. The brilliance of his golden sword was blinding. Meanwhile, Yasmin flipped her hand, and a bone sword appeared in her grip. It looked ordinary, but as she brandished it, the sword emanated a mysterious and powerful aura. Fuxi, the snake goddess, and King Yayan also activated their bloodlines. They all understood that they were fighting for their lives, so they would enter this battle at full strength. The air soon filled with powerful auras. Green shoots suddenly sprouted from the ground as the heavenly eye vine joined the battle. The shoots rapidly grew into countless thick, thorny vines, transforming the flat ground into a dense, prickly forest. As the battle was about to start, Sawyer and Thurston felt an unexpected vibration in their chests. Suddenly, two black semicircles appeared out of nowhere, marking their bodies. The two brothers stared down at the black semicircles on their chests, wearing identical expressions of shock and confusion. Pearson had already begun to launch an attack, but he stopped abruptly, gazing warily at the strange black marks. The black sun was a bloodline theurgy unique to Sawyer and Thurston. Only when the two brothers faced each other could the complete black sun be summoned. The black sun was an incomprehensible world. If any god was trapped inside, they would be killed. There was no possibility of survival. Indeed, the most significant feature of the black sun was the impossibility of escaping from it. Once Sawyer and Thurston separated, there would be no exit. No matter how strong one was and what special abilities they had, they could never pass through an exit that did not exist. For instance, once in the Supreme Pure Realm, the three Eternal Realm Hunters had encountered the immortal Cyan Bone Ghosts, and used the black sun on them. It was said that the 99 Cyan Bone Ghosts in the Supreme Pure Realm never died. They had wandered aimlessly for a long time in the Supreme Pure Realm, killing countless creatures who crossed their paths. The element spirit civilization and the Nihility race had been unable to deal with them, and instead evaded the Cyan Bone Ghosts when they encountered them. But when Sawyer and Thurston had encountered them, two Cyan Bone Ghosts had been devoured by the black sun. They were never seen again after that. For all intents and purposes, they were dead, killed by the black sun. Since even the Cyan Bone Ghosts couldn't escape the black sun, how could Zen ever manage it? After Sawyer and Thurston sucked Zen into the black sun, they were absolutely certain that he was not only gone, but dead. They had never imagined that someone could survive after being devoured by the black sun. It was too strange to even consider. What's happening? Pearson asked quickly, looking with concern at the brothers. I don't know. I have never seen half of the black sun before. As Sawyer spoke, he was interrupted by movement within the black semicircle on his chest. He staggered backwards. Something was crawling out from within the dark depths. It was half a body. Everyone stared, mouths gaping, while the other half of the body also crawled out from the semicircle in Thurston's chest. The movements of the two halves were coordinated. Obviously, they belonged to a single being, although an invisible space in the middle still separated them as they crawled out. The two halves of the black sun exerted an irresistible gravitational force upon each other. Independent of any action by Sawyer and Thurston, the two black semicircles drew closer and closer to each other, dragging the two brothers towards one another. Finally, the two halves met, and the black sun was formed. As the circle became whole, so did the two halves of the body, joining together to form a single human shape. Chapter 3562, Stand. The man's body was dark in color. Although the people around him could not see his appearance clearly, his 8-foot-tall figure gave away that he was Zen. Cough, cough, cough. At that moment, Zen coughed violently and spat out a black mass. He coughed up so much it took him a long time to recover. Meanwhile, Sawyer and Thurston still couldn't believe and wondered how he had escaped. After all, such a thing never happened before. The only unexpected thing that happened was that the Cyan Bone Ghosts' bodies were too powerful and remained intact for a long while in the black sun. Back then, the Cyan Bone Ghosts, who were still alive after being absorbed, wanted to escape, but Sawyer quickly put Thurston's hand down, so they failed to get out. However, the situation was completely different this time. Usually, they controlled the Black Sun, but now it was the Black Sun that controlled them. The two brothers never imagined that such a thing would happen. He got out of the Black Sun by force. What kind of strength does it need? In shock, Thurston looked at Zen, who was coughing. The two brothers had controlled the Black Sun for a long time, and during that period, they thoroughly studied it. According to their study, someone unknown had created the Black Sun. It should be a remarkably perfect prison. Anyone who got locked up inside it could not get out unless both Sawyer and Thurston helped them. From the design point of view, the Black Sun was perfect. Yet, today, someone broke this perfect philosophy and got out of it. What are you waiting for? Swallow him again. I don't believe he can escape a second time. Pearson quickly jumped up, and the spider thread swerved towards the opposite direction and shrouded Zen. In turn, Zen, who was still in a fit of violent coughs, suddenly stopped. Then in a bent position, he turned his head and stared at Pearson. His whole body was pitch black, but his eyeballs were a little white. His bright and sharp eyes were like arrows that were ready to leave the bowstring any time, which unnerved Pearson and slightly weakened his momentum. The moment Pearson paused for a bit, Zen fiercely pounced forward with his hands on the ground. Then, he ran like a cheetah for 2 steps and finally grabbed Pearson by the neck. Boom, boom, Pearson's head collided against the ground as Zen seized his neck and firmly pressed his body down. Whop! Afterward, Zen pushed his body to make a ditch on the ground, and then raised a fist to punch him. If Zen punched him, he would surely die. Just as Zen's fist touched the tip of his nose, his head and body suddenly turned into thin spider threads. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. His threads had a sealing effect and could perfectly close off the bloodline power. Zen had previously been caught off guard, and the ancestry-level bloodline could not help him, so he got trapped inside the Black Sun. Hiss, hiss, hiss. After Pearson's threads wrapped tightly around Zen, they continued to weave until they turned into Pearson's head. What are you waiting for? Pearson angrily yelled at Sawyer and Thurston. The three of them cooperated closely. When faced with a tough opponent, Pearson subdued their target with his threads, and then Sawyer and Thurston used the Black Sun to suck in the target. Once the Black Sun had sucked in the target, Pearson's spider threads fell off the target's body to prevent Pearson from being sucked into it. The three of them always worked together closely and tacitly, almost without any communication. This time, however, Sawyer and Thurston just stood still. Since Zen had already escaped from the Black Sun once, he could escape from it again. However, all the Eternal Realm hunters were people who lived on the verge of death. They couldn't possibly avoid trying just because it was hard for the Black Sun to kill Zen. The real reason they stopped was because of King Yayan's words during the previous conversation. These humans were the current civilization in the chaos. They were the hope of completing the finale way. Based on the actions of the Nodding race in the past, they should be friends of Nodding race and be the ones who the Nodding race supported. Moreover, the powers Zen had exhibited shocked them. Someone like him indeed deserved to be hunted by the element spirit civilization, which offered a generous bounty to whoever caught him. Furthermore, he could also possibly complete the finale way. Do something, Pearson continued to shout. What's wrong with your companions? Zen stretched out his hand and grabbed Pearson's head. With a gentle pinch, Pearson's head immediately turned into countless spider threads. It was not easy to kill Pearson. When Zen got trapped in the Black Sun, he did not hear conversation outside. Thus, he did not know the reason. However, Pearson's two companions suddenly hesitated, which naturally gave him a chance. As soon as Zen was about to attack the twins, King Yayan suddenly said, "Zen, they are not enemies. I think you all have the same stand." Squeak. Zen looked at King Yayan in confusion. "If you really plan to complete the finale way, I think we are indeed not enemies," said Sawyer. At that point, Zen quickly understood Sawyer's words. There were very few creatures on other shore who still insisted on the finale way, and most of the others paid allegiance to the element spirit civilization or had died. But these people were indeed allies. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The spider threads slipped down from Zen's body and quickly turned into Pearson's body. "Are you idiots?" Pearson said in exasperation. From the beginning to the end, he didn't believe a single word from King Yayan. The two brothers from the Nodding race were too naive. They still couldn't forget about the finale way, and now they were fooled by a few words. Then again, Pearson didn't have a powerful combat strength. If the two brothers did not want to cooperate, then he definitely could not fight Zen head-on. What was worse was that there were several Eternal Realm warriors with Zen. Anyway, it's true that the element spirit civilization tries to kill them, Sawyer confirmed. If Pear Hill, which the snake goddess had mentioned, could deal with the Nihility race and the element spirit civilization, then Sawyer and Thurston were willing to side with them unconditionally. Suddenly, a barrage of loud footsteps came from not far away. Da, 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 a group of creatures, half human and half horse, charged towards them at an exceptionally fast speed. It's the sacred horse race, Fuxi exclaimed. The sacred horse race might not be the best in the Grand Pure Realm, but they were the most challenging race to deal with. They moved too fast that no one could catch up with them or escape from them. They fought their opponents to death. Because the Eternal Realm Hunters had delayed Zen for such a long time, he and the others encountered the members of the sacred horse race. I hope you two won't get me into trouble, Pearson snorted coldly. As he spoke, he turned around and flicked his finger. Then, he transformed into extraordinarily thin spider threads that quietly spread out on the ground. Da, 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 the members of the sacred horse race continued to get closer. In a blink, they finally arrived. The leader of the group was 30 feet tall and carried a spear full of thorns on his shoulder. He shouted excitedly, "How cooperative of you! Do you wait for us here?" Chapter 3563, Heading North. Woo, hoo, hoo. A large group of members from the sacred horse race shouted from behind the leader, and their loud voices filled the air. They liked to move fast when they got excited. People saw twisted shadows as they galloped. Their bodies traversed distances at speeds that the naked eye could not see. This group from the sacred horse race moved in insane ways. They were like beams of light that dazzled everyone around them. However, their excitement did not last long. Pearson merely lifted his arm a little, but the spider threads had already formed a large net, which trapped all the members of the sacred horse race inside it. After the spider web wrapped around the members of the sacred horse race, who originally moved insanely fast, their speed drastically dropped at once. They also discovered that their thurgies became entirely ineffective. It's your turn, Pearson said without looking back. Although he did not agree with Sawyer and Thurston's ideas, the three of them, who were Eternal Realm Hunters, had wandered on the Three Purities stage for so long that they were like brothers. Since Sawyer and Thurston were so stubborn, Pearson had no choice but stand with them and fight. Sawyer and Thurston held their hands together, and the black sun suddenly appeared between the two of them. Whoosh! The black sun spun rapidly and released an extraordinarily strong attraction force. Even Zen could not resist the force, let alone these members of the sacred horse race. What is that? I'm trapped in these spider threads. Why can't I use my bloodline power? The members of the sacred horse race were in a mess. After all, how could they resist the terrifying power of the black sun? One by one, the black sun automatically sucked in the members of the sacred horse race. Some of the braver members of their race threw their spears before they got sucked in, but their efforts proved useless. Within 9 seconds, the black sun sucked in all of the members of the sacred horse race. Meanwhile, Fuxi, the snake goddess, and the others quietly looked at each other. Indeed, the Eternal Realm Hunters deserved their reputation. They were formidable and mighty warriors. Afterwards, Sawyer and Thurston withdrew their hands, and the black sun disappeared. Then, its exit closed. The black sun would consume the members of the sacred horse race inside it. Since their physical bodies were not that strong, it would not take long to eat them away. Then, Sawyer cupped his hands towards Zen and said, "The element spirit civilization has marked you. Many races in the Grand Pure Realm have come to capture you from all directions, so you'd better leave here as soon as possible." Zen nodded. "Will you go with us?" he asked. "Go with you." Okay. Sawyer and Thurston didn't hesitate too much before they answered. The real reason the two of them joined the Eternal Realm Hunters was that they were homeless and had nowhere to go. Even though they had obtained great benefits after they became Eternal Realm Hunters, both of them still felt that the road ahead was long and meaningless. The finale way was the most meaningful goal that every ruling civilization pursued. However, in the many chaotic eras that passed, the two of them never found someone worthy of their support. Now, they both agreed that Zen was indeed the special one. Since they chose to give up the bone fragment's secret soul, they naturally wanted to see if this person was worthy of their trust. "Then come with us," Zen exclaimed. Swoosh, swoosh. At that moment, Thurston and Sawyer jumped up and stood on the back of the heavenly eye vine. Pearson, Sawyer looked back. If Pearson did not want to follow, then Sawyer wouldn't force him. Everyone had their ambitions, and the Eternal Realm Hunters were always free to pursue them. Then again, the three of them had gotten along well with each other for so many years, so of course, Pearson felt reluctant to leave them behind. With a bitter smile on his face, he jumped onto the heavenly eye vine. The heavenly eye vine is usually covered with arrow demons. It's not easy to deal with them. Why would it help you? Sawyer asked. In general, the Eternal Realm hunters were quite familiar with everything about the Grand Pure Realm and the Supreme Pure Realm. The arrow demons were also a non-human race that posed a high threat to the other races. Even the Eternal Realm hunters had to avoid them when they encountered them before. Therefore, the Eternal Realm hunters found it strange when the heavenly eye vine had now helped Zen and his companions. They are dead. He killed them all, King Yayan said as it pointed at Zen. Thurston and Sawyer slightly arched their eyebrows at King Yayan's words. The fact that Zen had forcefully escaped from the Black Sun already shocked both of them. Thus, they were even more surprised when they heard that Zen could deal with the arrow demons all alone. Pearson pursed his lips. He was suspicious by nature. Unless he saw it with his own eyes, he never believed it. Rumble. Soon enough, the heavenly eye vine went into the ground and quickly moved as it carried the people on it. When Claire, Les, and Slade saw what happened through the Shadow Warriors, they were also speechless. When the Eternal Realm hunters first appeared, Claire and her companions were a little excited. Several years ago, Claire had personally tracked down the 3 remaining Eternal Realm hunters, but she still failed to kill them. These Eternal Realm hunters were undoubtedly all-powerful. If they weren't careful enough, even mighty warriors like Claire and Les could find their lives in danger. As soon as the Eternal Realm hunters took action, Claire told Slade that if the Eternal Realm hunters killed Zen and the others in his group, they would get the Bone Fragment's secret soul as a reward. Even if there was hostility between the Element Spirit Civilization and the Eternal Realm hunters, the Element Spirit Civilization never broke its promise. But not long after they made a move, the 3 Eternal Realm hunters stood together with Zen and his companions, which was confusing. It seems that your method did not work, Claire said and glanced at Slade. Though the Element Spirit Civilization had repressed the Finale Way for so many years, there were still many warriors at the Eternal Realm who yearned for the Finale Way on the other shore. If Zen rose to power, then the Eternal Realm warriors would probably all choose to follow him. The Element Spirit Civilization did not want to see that. If these Eternal Realm hunters wanted to follow them to death, then let them be, Slade said in a very calm voice. On the other hand, Les just laughed and said nothing. Along the way to the north, the heavenly eye vine continuously traveled through the layer of soil. After it crossed a distance of about 3,000 miles, they arrived at a range of bumpy hills. The hills were quite sturdy and could bear the pressure of over 100,000 divine megatons. Even the heavenly eye vine found it hard to travel through them, so it just crawled along the hill's terrain. Quack, quack, just then, they heard a strange scream from the sky. It turned out that about 8 peculiar birds lined up and spiraled downwards. The snake goddess released crimson shadows, which were like an octopus tentacles as they lashed at the sky. Her shadows did not aim at anything, but they forced the strange birds to gather together. Then, a mark of 8 diagrams appeared on the birds' bodies. Boom! Then came an intense explosion in the air which struck the strange birds to death. However, there were no corpses, but only some bird feathers that slowly fluttered in the air. Fuxi blew on his fist and said impassively, "How dare these strange birds attack us?" As they headed north, he killed some non-human creatures who were surprisingly fast along the way. He showed quite formidable methods and skills and slaughtered those non-human creatures in no time. Pearson quietly sized Fuxi up. These human warriors in the Eternal Realm didn't seem to be as weak as he thought. At least, Fuxi was qualified to join the Eternal Realm hunters if it was in the past. Chapter 3564, Golden Axe. As they traveled north, the low hills continued to rise and eventually turned into lofty mountains. Fortunately, these mountains were close to one another, making it easier for the heavenly eye vine to leap from mountaintop to mountaintop. After the heavenly eye vine had crossed the biggest mountain, a path appeared that led northwest. This path extended to the horizon with no end at sight. On one side of the path rested a deep valley, the Purple Wind Gorge. Legend had it that this valley was formed by gusts of wind over the years. When Fuxi and the snake goddess saw the path, their expressions shifted. Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasamine, and King Yayan's faces darkened as well. The path seems to be covered by white mist, Zen pointed out in confusion. This is not a white mist, Fuxi snapped back. It's the members of the mystical void race. The mystical void race? Zen raised an eyebrow in curiosity. He was not surprised, especially because he sensed a vibrant energy of life as they approached the area. At the time, it was an odd feeling, so he did not ask earlier. The snake goddess nodded and continued to explain, this long, winding road is the Silent Path. Members of the mystical void race are scattered along the Silent Path. As we go through this path, we cannot make a sound or we will infuriate the members of the mystical void race. She then lifted her hand to point at the mist. It seems that someone already bothered them. They took this form to block future travelers. Zen walked towards the path's entrance and stretched out his hand to touch the mist, but his finger was blocked by an invisible space wall. Now that the element spirit civilization is tracking you, they might have already figured out where you were headed. They must have irritated the members of the mystical void race to stop you beforehand, Pearson said as he walked up and pressed a hand against the space wall. All we have to do is eliminate the members of the mystical void race, responded Zen. You can try, said Fuxi, shrugging his shoulders. Without any hesitation, Zen sent a punch into the space wall. His punch was anything but weak. With one strong hit of energy, the wall shattered and revealed a hole of 60 feet deep. However, the hole was only empty for a second. A strange whine echoed out and 2 white dots appeared behind the space wall above them. Such dots could reflect surrounding scenes and sounds. In any case, they were the eyes and mouths of the mystical void race. Seeing that its body had been badly damaged, the creature cried and howled repeatedly. Meanwhile, the other parts of its body pressed against the hole Zen punched. In an instant, the hole was repaired completely. The members of the mystical void race felt no pain, so their concept of injury was non-existent. If a part of their body was destroyed, all they had to do was to fix it with other parts. This meant that Zen's punch only reduced the size of this member of mystical void race. Boom! Just then, Zen threw out an even stronger punch. This time, he used his full strength. Even the 3 Eternal Realm Hunters who had seen a lot of the world were in awe at his tremendous power. They had known Zen's physical body was powerful enough to kill Holly, but they never expected his burst of strength would be so terrifying. If they ever came into contact with his punch, they would all be shattered. Crack! Suddenly, a long, thin hole stretched over to 1,000 feet long. On the invisible space wall. Awoo! The member of the mystical void race whined once again as its body shrank a little more. However, as the body shrank, a second member of their race swelled up to fill up the vacancy that developed. As Zen saw this, his jaw dropped in surprise. His efforts were to no avail. Don't waste your time and energy on them. Once the members of the mystical void race swell up, you won't be able to pass through the silent path, Sawyer tried to convince Zen. They would have to destroy everything above the silent path to eliminate the members of the mystical void race. God knew how long it would take to achieve that. Is this the only route to the northwest? Zen asked. There is one other way, the snake goddess stood up and said. We can continue moving north through the Purple Wind Gorge. The Purple Wind Gorge is an alternative path, yes. But once the strong gusts of wind arise, it will also be a hard route to endure, King Yayan sighed. But we have no other choice now, Pearson shrugged. For him, the humans lacked preparation for the journey and underestimated the element spirit civilization. The element spirit civilization developed in the 3 purities stage for so long. Certainly, nobody else knew this place better than them. From the movement of Zen and the group, it was not difficult for the element spirit civilization to guess where they were headed. If they wanted to avoid the hunt of the element spirit civilization, they should have taken more dangerous, misleading routes. In the past, when the Eternal Realm Hunters were chased by the element spirit civilization, they were forced to enter the evil waters. This was how they shook the element spirit civilization off their track. The element spirit civilization would stop their hunt when faced with life-threatening areas. However, the Eternal Realm Hunters paid a considerable price. Almost all of them were annihilated in the evil waters. Fuxi, the snake goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai and the others all looked at Zen. Although Zen was youngest among them, he was obviously regarded as a decision-maker in this group. After hesitating for a moment, Zen heard a voice within him. He listened intently, and then his eyes flashed with determination. Let's go through the Purple Wind Gorge. Without hesitation, they climbed up the heavenly eye vine again and slid down from the top of the mountain. They continued moving north until they arrived at a plateau. The plateau rose to a higher plane every 100 miles, making it appear like a massive stairway to heaven. The formation was called the Sky Ladder Plateau. After they passed through the stage-end passage, the Eternal Realm warriors of the Grand Plane stage fell to the edges of the Grand Pure Realm. They wanted to land nearer to the Sky Ladder Plateau because it was a desolate area with close to no powerful races around the area. There were a total of 7 steps going up the Sky Ladder Plateau. At the end of the 7th step rested the famous Purple Wind Gorge. Once the Heavenly Eye Vine lifted them onto the Sky Ladder Plateau, Fuxi used the Heavenly Eye to scout their surroundings. All of a sudden, his face turned stone cold. It seems to be even worse on this way. What's wrong? More warriors are gathered there? Asked Eastern Emperor Tai. Fuxi shook his head. No. They're all gone. The creatures from other races have disappeared from my vision. As they heard this, the snake goddess, Yasamine, and the others exchanged looks of confusion. Sawyer asked from the side, you mean you can't see them through the heavenly eye? It was not rare that warriors moved in concealment. However, the heavenly eye easily saw through most disguises and concealment methods. Now that they failed to see their enemies' movements, this only meant that their concealment methods were far from ordinary. Fuxi shook his head and gave the vine extended from the heavenly eye to Sawyer. Sawyer took it and looked around through the eye, but saw nothing as well. Just as Sawyer opened his mouth to speak, they all sensed a formidable power of space from above them. All of a sudden, the clouds parted and a huge golden axe appeared from behind. It slashed down at them before anyone could even react. The axe was several hundred feet in size. Its edge was engraved with strange Sanskrit words across it, and it radiated circles of golden light that emitted an extremely strong aura. Crack! In a split second, the golden axe fell from the sky and chopped down towards the ground, slicing the thick heavenly eye vine in half. Chapter 3565, Golden Flames. The heavenly eye vine's only weakness was the heavenly eye. As a plant, any part cut off from its body could still grow and regenerate independently. Back when the arrow demons fought with the lightning ghosts, the latter utilized their ability to travel through space from thousands of miles away to catch their enemies off guard. In a flash, they were able to cut the heavenly eye vine into dozens of pieces. Over time, these heavenly eye vine cuttings took root independently and grew all over the place, which became even more enemies of the lightning ghosts. However, this golden axe that appeared out of the blue was no ordinary weapon. When this golden axe was wielded, it cut through the vine and left behind a small circle of golden light. Upon closer inspection, this circle of light was actually golden flames that quickly spread along the length of the vine. If nothing was done to stop them, the golden flames would quickly swallow up the whole plant and reduce it into nothing but ash. Whoosh! A sharp golden ray of sword radiance slashed through the vine as Eastern Emperor Tai brandished his blade and cut off the part that already caught fire. From a once mighty vine, the sliced part fell to the ground and burned bright until there was nothing but ash and smoke. Yasamine sported an extremely serious look on her face. Who in the world summoned the golden axe to attack us? Fuxi scouted through the heavenly eye and also spread out his spiritual sense in an effort to find the target. I don't know. The power of space is so weird. After the huge axe appeared, it quickly shot up into the air and disappeared right before their very eyes. Not even Fuxi's efforts were enough to find its location. I recognize that golden axe. It's the bull-headed monster's weapon, Thurston told them. Bull-headed monsters were one of the most dangerous races in the Grand Pure Realm as they had excellent combat ability. Fortunately, their weakness lay in their lackluster agility, so one would generally be safe if they kept their distance. Those creatures aren't idiots. If you're their common target, then they would team up and stop at nothing to subdue you. That's an incredibly serious matter that we need to consider, Pearson grumbled. It wasn't that difficult to fight against a single race. Each had their own strengths but also their own weaknesses. If one knew what these weaknesses were and how to exploit them, then it would be an easy fight. Known as the strongest melee fighters, the bull-headed monsters were a considerably powerful force, and those targeted by them would undoubtedly face a miserable end. In the past, the Eternal Realm hunters dealt with them easily through the advantage of agility. However, the situation now was different. They were not just dealing with the bull-headed monsters but all the other races. With everyone's strengths and weaknesses balanced, the opposition became a formidable force to be reckoned. Even the Nihility race and the Element Spirit civilization would flinch at the face of such an outstanding coalition, what more Zen's puny group. Buzz! A space fluctuation appeared above them, accompanied by a flash of golden light. For a split second, everything was silent until a huge, golden axe suddenly emerged and hacked down towards them. Fortunately, the heavenly eye vine was prepared and twisted its body to the side to avoid the attack. The golden axe hit the ground instead of the vine and left behind a shining, golden crack. Flames blazed within the crack but seemed to be unable to burn the ground. A few minutes later, the golden fire was automatically extinguished. It doesn't matter where they are. We should climb up to the top of the sky ladder plateau first, Zen suggested. With Zen's command, the heavenly eye vine twisted its body and quickly fled the place. Buzz! Of course, there was no way their escape was going to be so easy. As the heavenly eye vine fled, another space fluctuation appeared above them as two golden axes dropped down at the same time. The axes boxed in the heavenly eye vine from both sides and left no space for it to dodge. To the left, Zen roared. Quick reflexes were what they needed at that moment. The heavenly eye vine followed Zen's command and twisted its body to the left. With the golden axe on the left about to slash down on their heads, Fuxi, the snake goddess, and King Yayan all scattered but, to their horror, Zen remained to charge at it head-on. Thurston's eyes widened in shock when he witnessed what Zen was about to do. Is he crazy? What in the world is he doing? Sawyer shared his sentiments and shouted after Zen desperately. Get out of the way. What are you doing? These axes were no ordinary weapons and the flames they emitted were called life-devouring flames that could burn any living creatures to ashes in mere seconds. Crack! Zen took a wide stance and raised his hands in an effort to resist the oncoming golden axe. Sharp as it wasn't enough to cut through Zen's body. What a strong body! After all, his physical body is even stronger than Holly's. But the life-devouring flames. No matter how strong his body is, the flames will still devour him. There was nothing the Eternal Realm hunters could really do but stare nervously at Zen and wait for his fate to consume him. Sure enough, the small golden flames quickly spread from the sharp edge of the axe and onto Zen's arm as it burned his flesh with a sizzling sound. Zen's virtually indestructible body quickly crumpled and charred under the onslaught of the flames, but still, he remained standing. Do you want to burn me to nothing but ashes? He muttered. The flames continued to lick at his skin, but Zen continued to carry the axe with both hands. Once caught in the flames, the fire would only continue to spread along the victim's body faster and faster. If this went on, Zen would definitely be burned to nothing, including the ancestry-level bloodline inside his body. Up until now, the only way Zen was able to use this formidable ancestry-level bloodline he obtained was by putting himself in danger. If he helped his friends but did not put his own safety in question, then the bloodline would never activate. In a real predicament like this one, he was sure that the ancestry-level bloodline would rise up and protect itself. Buzz! Sure enough, Zen's shoulder suddenly swelled and formed a big sack that exploded and turned into a monstrous, gaping mouth with sharp teeth. Okay, here it goes, Zen murmured to himself. He could only sigh at the sight of the ugly mouth on his shoulder. The ancestry-level bloodline was truly powerful and Zen had yet to see any limits or weaknesses to it. However, every time it showed off its power, it seemed to always attach a gruesome and somewhat terrifying addition to his body. Whoosh, whoosh, everyone watched as this monstrous mouth that suddenly grew on his shoulder sucked and devoured the life-devouring flames, including those that burned on the axe blade. Once all of the flames had been eaten, the golden axe became nothing more than an ordinary chunk of sharp metal. All Zen needed to do was exert a bit of strength before he was able to snap the huge axe in half. Everyone who witnessed this scene almost had their eyes pop right out of their sockets in surprise. What is with that weird mouth that suddenly grew on his shoulder? How was that mouth able to devour the flames so easily? They all couldn't help but wonder to themselves. Among the three Eternal Realm hunters, Pearson was the most knowledgeable and also most scheming. When he saw what had happened, he surmised that Zen's body was able to adjust itself to all sorts of predicaments. So did that mean that he had also sorts of method that could correspond to defeating other Thurgies? If that was the case, then wouldn't that make him entirely omnipotent? It was merely a conjecture since Pearson had no way to prove it. Who knows, maybe it was mere coincidence that Zen's body had the ability to restrain the life-devouring flames. However, he remembered the fact that Zen was also able to escape from the Black Sun with a strange physical form. Was that also a coincidence then? There seemed to be too many coincidences in this world. Pearson thought it through but couldn't come up with a sound hypothesis as of the moment. Maybe Sawyer and Thurston made the right choice to follow him, he thought to himself. All of a sudden, more power of space surged across the sky as multiple giant axes began to rain down upon them in succession. Chapter 3566, A Trick. The Heavenly Eye Vine was a monster that had lived for countless years. It could feel the space fluctuation in the sky, and how strong the fluctuation was really struck it dumb. It would eventually die if it kept fleeing this way, so it could only place its hope on Zen now. After all, it was a fact that Zen managed to crush a huge golden axe with his bare hands, his strength was indisputable. Thus, while it dodged, it also used Zen as a shield to face those golden axes. In fact, considering the fact that Zen was still standing on it, Zen wouldn't just stay still and watch on with folded arms. Even if the Heavenly Eye Vine didn't do this, Zen would still take the initiative to fight off those golden axes. Every time a huge golden axe swung down on them, the big mouth on Zen's shoulder would immediately open and suck down the life-devouring flames. The originally golden axe would immediately lose its luster and turn into an ordinary iron axe. Although the ordinary iron axe would still retain its slashing momentum, Zen could rip it into halves with just a little twisting movement, and it would end up being thrown aside casually by Zen. Bang, crack, 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 boom. Some of the axes were torn apart by Zen with bare hands, some cracked, while some others were riddled with holes. All in all, the fate of those golden axes, which had appeared out of nowhere, never strayed far from being destroyed into pieces by Zen. Something unexpected also occurred during the fight. Someone used the space theurgy and retrieved the broken giant axes. However, they soon realized that the destroyed giant axes were useless and stopped. Since no one took care of those broken axes, wherever the heavenly eye vine passed, there would always be piles of iron scraps lying on the ground. When Zen first attacked, Fuxi, the snake goddess, and the others were quite worried, but upon seeing Zen becoming more and more proficient in dealing with the golden axes, their tight nerves gradually loosened. Right in front of them, at the end of the first stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau, there were over 100 creatures with transparent wings hovering in the air. These creatures were only about half the height of an adult human. They had small builds, but their heads were big. The combinations of these made them look funny. Each one of them was covered in a layer of space membrane. It was precisely these layers of space membrane that changed the surrounding light rays and allowed them and the bull-headed men to hide well. Even if one's spiritual sense swept over this area, their presence wouldn't be detected. These short creatures were the space-manipulating spirits in the Grand Pure Realm, and just like their name indicated, they were highly talented in manipulating space. After the space-manipulating spirits met the bull-headed men halfway, rather than engaging in a dead or alive battle like they usually did, both races unprecedentedly chose to join hands. Both races were determined to get the bone fragment's secret soul, so after discussing with each other, the space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men lurked at the end of the first stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau, ready to ambush Zen and his group. The bull-headed men were very powerful, and the help of the space-manipulating spirits made up for their shortcomings. It was like adding brilliance to their present splendor. In addition, they were in the dark, while Zen and his group were in the light. They should have been able to catch Zen and his group off guard and bring them down easily. But the truth was poles apart from their imagination. The space-manipulating spirits used the bull-headed men's axes to attack Zen, but Zen dealt with them easily and even smashed them into piles of scrap metal. The bull-headed men's axes were forged elaborately. They would get a golden spirit axe only after they became real soldiers. In general, they could only have one such axe in their lives. Only those who'd made a great contribution would be awarded with a second golden spirit axe. The bull-headed men who came here were the most powerful elites of their race. Many of them had 2 golden spirit axes, and some even had 3. In the beginning, the bull-headed men were quite willing to use their golden spirit axes to attack Zen. However, when they saw Zen effortlessly tear their golden spirit axes apart, they felt heartbroken. Those with only 2 golden spirit axes refused to attack again and even began to quarrel with the space-manipulating spirits. What are you thinking? That guy's not afraid of our axes. The space-manipulating spirits didn't show any weakness and retorted. We've overestimated you, losers. Don't you claim to have the strongest combat power among those in the Grand Pure Realm? You're all elites, but you can't even defeat that one guy. When the 2 races were in a fierce dispute, a blue-haired space-manipulating spirit said, "Everyone, shut up." A bull-headed man with golden horns also roared, "Stop arguing. It's meaningless." The 2 were leaders of their teams. After they stepped up, the 2 sides finally quieted down. The bull-headed man with golden horns said, "They don't know where we're yet, but they're heading towards us, we can kill them later." Right, the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit echoed in agreement. There was a vicious glint in her eyes. "I'll trap that human in a space maze. Without him, we can kill the others easily." Zen had the ability to devour the life-devouring flames. It was something that neither the bull-headed men nor the space-manipulating spirits ever imagined. Nevertheless, from their point of view, it was Zen's physical body that was strong. Since it was a physical body, it wouldn't be difficult for them to deal with it. The 2 races kept hiding at the end of the first stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau, waiting for the arrival of Zen and his group. 1,000 miles. 300 miles, 100 miles. When Zen and the others finally entered their line of sight, the distance between them was only about 40 miles. Buzz, buzz. The space-manipulating spirits flapped their wings, and a strong spatial power spread around with them as the center. The bull-headed men were also ready to fight. They held their golden spirit axes tightly, and their breaths were heavy. 20 miles, 10 miles, 5 miles. Zen and his group were practically within reach now. "Fight," the bull-headed man with golden horns bellowed. In an instant, the space-manipulating spirits withdrew the space camouflage. They flapped their transparent wings, and triangle space fragments shot towards the heavenly eye vine-like raindrops. The bull-headed men's golden spirit axes shone brightly as they rushed forward. Endless corridor. With a gentle wave of her hand, the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit created a winding space corridor in front of her. Buzz. The space fluctuated, and a second later, the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit already appeared above the heavenly eye vine. She suddenly clapped her hands, and the space corridor immediately enveloped Zen. In the blink of an eye, Zen fell into the space corridor and vanished from everyone's sight. Da, da, da. Unable to dodge the triangular fragments released by the space-manipulating spirits, the heavenly eye vine's huge body was instantly riddled with wounds and soon torn into pieces. The three Eternal Realm Hunters, as well as Fuxi, the Snake Goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai, King Yayan, and Yasmin couldn't withstand the bull-headed men's huge axes. In a matter of seconds, all of them were killed. Blood gushed out of their wounds and flooded the area. Everything went on smoothly just like the space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men had planned. Is it so simple? The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit took a doubtful look at the corpses lying on the ground and then at Zen, who was still trapped in the endless corridor. There was a powerful, constantly twisting spatial force within the endless corridor, but it shouldn't have had much effect on Zen. However, the purpose of this endless corridor was just to trap Zen. The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit's eyes widened suddenly. She saw that Zen's body had already been badly twisted by space in the endless corridor. But his physical body was so powerful that he could even slay Holly. How could it be twisted by mere spatial power? It's a trick, the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit shouted as a realization hit her. Chapter 3567, The Skills of the Hunters. The bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits were already consumed with suspicions about the entire situation. After all, the element spirit civilization was prepared to reward them handsomely if they were to capture Zen and his companions. The weakest of them were still at the Eternal Realm. Even if they attacked Zen and his group without a warning, they were capable enough to defend themselves. But surprisingly, they were quickly killed without putting up a decent fight. What just happened? The bull-headed man with golden horns asked, with his eyes overflowing with confusion. The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit shook the endless corridor in her palm slightly. At this action, a corpse in a twisted condition was thrown out of it. With her ocean-like eyes reflecting her determination, she spread her transparent wings evenly and prepared to take flight. Her body ascended to the air with the blue light in her eyes shining in contrast to her hair. As she flapped her wings, the immense power generating in the space around her spread around like an invisible tidal wave. The speed at which the power of space spread was not fast, but it had enough momentum to cover a significantly large area. Moreover, nothing within its scope could deceive it or remain hidden. It was much better than the spiritual sense when used for detecting. The time ticked away, 1 second followed by the other without any progress. As a result, the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit felt her nerves tense up in confusion. They were supposed to find the heavenly eye vine on the first stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau, but it was nowhere to be seen. How could this be? Stop looking for it. It has gone to the second stair, the golden-horned bull-headed man said suddenly after noticing the intensity of her predicament. How can you be so sure? The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit questioned him. But as soon as she turned around to face him, she was left speechless. Her eyes instinctively fell on the ice piece in the hands of the golden-horned bull-headed man. The ice piece was given by the element spirit civilization. As of now, Zen and his companions were being closely pursued by the Shadow Warriors. They could easily track Zen and his group to know their whereabouts using the ice piece. The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit averted her eyes and lowered them to the ground to avoid contact as she felt flustered. She put too much faith in her talent for manipulating space. Never in her wildest dreams did she imagine Zen and his group would play a trick on her right under her nose. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. After experiencing a setback, she kept spiraling up until she reached a height of more than 10,000 feet. Each stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau was over 10,000 feet high. At her height, she was able to see the second stair. Buzz. With a flash of intense blue light sparkling in her eyes, she said in a low voice resembling a whisper, "It runs very fast." As if responding to her gesture, a long, yet thin space corridor shot forward at an untraceable speed. She grabbed the end of the space corridor securely in her hand and dragged it down with force, forging a right-angled space corridor. This space corridor held the potential to teleport everyone. The killing intent in her eyes raged like flames that refused to be put out. A hefty price would have to be paid for fooling her. Meanwhile, on the second stair of the sky ladder plateau, the heavenly eye vine was twisting and turning its flexible body like that of a snake. Its movements were astonishingly agile on the plateau. Sawyer was holding a small object in his hands. It was the heavenly eye vine, but it was dozens of times smaller than its original size. The sizes of Zen, Fuxi, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others were also reduced in proportion. How pathetic! Fuxi's eyes twitched as he stared at his substitute. Although he knew it was a fake, he couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness while watching its body being torn up limb from limb. Wow, you really live up to your reputation as Eternal Realm Hunters. Your skills are so ingenious and amazing, King Yayan praised in an awestruck tone. I'm flattered. We've been staying in the Grand Pure Realm for a long time, so we're quite familiar with this place, Sawyer said with a confident smile. The Eternal Realm Hunters did not join any force and had been wandering around in the Grand Pure Realm. The Nihility race and the Element Spirit civilization were in constant search for them. In addition to that, they had to deal with a large number of creatures from other races trying to locate their whereabouts to capture them. To be able to survive under such hostile circumstances, they had to toughen themselves up naturally. Just now when they were attacked, Sawyer made quick speculation about the attackers being the bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits. The basis of his judgment was the fact that only the space-manipulating spirits harnessed the expertise required to be able to throw those axes over with such accuracy. Moreover, Sawyer accurately pinpointed the position of bull-headed men and space-manipulating spirits. He also had a clear idea of their plans to ambush them ahead. Thinking quick on his feet to avoid the awaiting calamity, he used a treasure that was discovered in the Supreme Pure Realm. It was a type of white soil that could morph into anything and imitate things perfectly. It was still debatable whether it was alive or not. Nevertheless, it could duplicate everything perfectly. The white mud was quite a popular other shore token in the Supreme Pure Realm. The Eternal Realm warriors that carried it could transform into any form at will. Just as Sawyer used the white mud, Thurston took out another treasure. It was a round mirror that was barely visible to the naked eye and harnessed a remarkably powerful hiding effect. After the white mud transformed into their shapes, Thurston covered them with the round mirror. Their perfect cooperation formed substitutes that were impossible to tell apart from the original. Their commendable skills earned them the respect of Fuxi and the Snake Goddess along with the others. Putting their survival experience into practice, they were able to evade two fatal attempts of assassination aimed towards them. One was when they were chased by another shore race in the Grand Pure Realm, and the other was when they were hunted down by the Nihility race. Each time they emerged victorious when it came to fooling the enemy and derailing their plans to capture them. But this time, there was an enormous loophole left unnoticed in their skills. The space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men were at a safe distance from them, which was why they were unable to notice their presence, but the two shadow warriors floating in the air still kept a close watch on the Snake Goddess and Eastern Emperor Tai. When Zen pointed out the loophole, Sawyer diffused his concerns with a slight wave of his hand. They could only hope that the space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men would not use the ice piece of the element spirit civilization. Fortunately for them, Sawyer's judgment was right on the money. If they find out these are fakes, they will try their best to catch up. We're not out of the woods yet, the Snake Goddess said with a grim expression on her face. Even if they had fooled their enemies once, they still hadn't escaped all potential threats that awaited them. The space-manipulating spirits were highly talented in manipulating space. It was only a matter of time before they caught up with Zen and his group for a full-blown confrontation. The space-manipulating spirits are persistent when it comes to their cause. They will surely come after us and build a space channel. As Pearson spoke, he took out a handful of brown ash from his Sumeru space. Simultaneously, a blue thin line made itself visible as it extended from the sky in the distance. The speed at which it approached them was so fast that it was hard to keep track of it with the naked eye. It was none other than the endless corridor released by the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit. Without wasting a moment, Pearson blew on the ash that rested on his palm. The ash then spread backwards. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Even though it was small in size, it still covered a massive area. The nature of the space in this area had shifted from its previous form. The large space seemed to have solidified, then it turned into thousands of fragments and collapsed. The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit had initially planned to drive the endless corridor right in front of Zen and the others to stop them in their tracks and later to teleport the bull-headed men and the other space-manipulating spirits there. The endless corridor was slightly different from the space channel. The space channel only closed the distance between two places, but the endless corridor had no limitations when it came to distance. It was lengthened or shortened at will by the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit. Therefore, regardless of the distance, they could cross it with something so simple as a single step. At this moment, the endless corridor drilled into the space created by the ash. If an ordinary space channel touched the ash, only the first part would solidify and then shatter. However, the moment the endless corridor touched the ash, it solidified as a whole. With a loud splash, all of it was shattered as though it were nothing. Chapter 3568, The Earthly Dragon Snakes. The blue-haired spirit controlled the endless corridor, putting the bull-headed men and the other space-manipulating spirits into it. However, as soon as they stepped in, the endless corridor collapsed with a loud bang, and they all fell off. Each step in the endless corridor was equal to a great distance. Thus, upon entry alone, some of the bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits had already reached the second stair of the sky ladder plateau, and others were now falling from over 10,000 feet high to the first stair of the plateau. The bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits now lay scattered all over the ground, though the height wasn't enough to cause these warriors to be injured. The blue-haired spirit's face fell at this development. What happened? Can't you keep it stable? The bull-headed man with golden horns demanded. It's the bone coagulating powder. The blue-haired spirit responded dismally. The bone coagulating powder rendered most space theurgies useless, and the endless corridor, apparently, was no exception. These people are trickier than we expected, the bull-headed man with golden horns muttered, frowning. They fell right into their opponent's trap. It's just a minor setback. We're still more powerful, they can't escape death forever. A blue light flashed in the blue-haired spirit's eyes. The killing intent was so strong it spread out along the space force, sending a chill down the space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men's hearts. Each stair of the sky ladder plateau had the same height, but the width differed. The width of each stair was a third shorter than that of the stair directly below it. Of course, the heavenly eye vine knew how powerful the bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits were. They were the two most fearsome races in the Grand Pure Realm. If they ever caught up to them, they would undoubtedly be killed. The vine made use of almost all its skills as it made its way through the sky ladder plateau. It wasn't long before it passed through the second and third stairs of the plateau. As it moved up, each stair of the plateau became narrower and narrower, and the time it took to cross it became shorter and shorter. After the bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits finally converged on the fourth stair, the blue-haired spirit once again activated the endless corridor. Learning from the last attempt, the blue-haired spirit did not extend the endless corridor straight to Zen's group this time, but extended to another side, a little past them. On the heavenly eye vine, Fuxi spotted the thin thread in the distance. That space thread is chasing us again. It's already on the other side of the plateau, Fuxi warned. Sawyer squinted at the distance. The endless corridor was just an azure thin thread. It couldn't be seen with the naked eye from afar. He shook his head. It's too far. It's impossible to destroy the passage from this distance. All we can do is to make sure they don't catch up, the snake goddess said firmly. Hearing this, the heavenly eye vine sped up again. The three eternal realm hunters were stunned into silence. Sawyer and Thurston knew that the arrow demons relied on this vine to move around, but they didn't expect it to be this fast. But just as they were about to reach the fifth stair of the sky ladder plateau, a swarm of flying creatures came into view. Dread gripped the group as they realized it was a large number of winged snakes. They were called the earthly dragon snakes. Though they were barely the size of a human baby's arm, each one was lethally venomous, and they always attacked in swarms. Do you three know any way to deal with the earthly dragon snakes? King Yayan asked urgently. The Eternal Realm hunters had so much experience, so the other Eternal Realm warriors naturally relied on them to know better. The earthly dragon snakes are afraid of the smell of sulfur stone. Having one on hand could protect us, Pearson suggested. But we don't have any right now, Thurston said, throwing up his hands in frustration. Do you? The earthly dragon snakes were located in the west of the Grand Pure Realm. When they needed to break into the earthly dragon snake's territory, the Eternal Realm hunters would dig for the sulfur stones, but they usually didn't prepare any. Besides, they had just come down from the Supreme Pure Realm. Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasamine and the others also shook their heads. They had never even heard of the sulfur stones, so how could they have such a thing? The faces of the three Eternal Realm hunters darkened. Without sulfur stones, they probably wouldn't be able to escape this obstacle. As the swarm of earthly dragon snakes got closer and closer, their venomous maws became more visible. The desperation loomed heavier on the group. You can use the black sun to absorb them, the snake goddess piped up. Thurston shook his head. No, we can't. He didn't bother to explain why they couldn't. After all, they had just joined this team. He still didn't completely trust Zen and his companions. However, Zen understood. He knew the space in the Black Sun wasn't that expansive. What was more, the creatures that were absorbed into the Black Sun were not instantly killed, but were just slowly exhausted until they dissipated. The real strength of the Black Sun was that it was difficult to break free from it. As long as the two brothers were separated, the Black Sun would not have an exit. No matter how powerful the creature was, it would be fatigued and die sooner or later. But just recently, the two brothers had already sucked so many members of the sacred horse race into it. They didn't know if the Black Sun had already wiped them out. Even if they were already dead, there was no certainty the Black Sun had enough space to hold so many earthly dragon snakes. I've heard the earthly dragon snakes have very weak defensive power. We could just kill them, then, Fuxi said, stepping forward. Kill so many earthly dragon snakes one by one. Pearson gave Fuxi a doubtful look. Even if we can do it, it will take too much time. We can't afford it, Sawyer pointed out. Right now, all the races in the Grand Pure Realm were gathering towards them. Given the difficulty of killing the earthly dragon snakes, taking them on would just give those races time to close in on them. It won't take us long, Fuxi said, smiling. The Sumeru space in his hand flashed with an azure light. A large amount of brown powder poured out from it. When Pearson saw the powder, he raised his eyebrows. What kind of powder is this? Even though the Eternal Realm hunters were experienced and knowledgeable, they didn't know how to use the imprisoning lightning, so they naturally didn't recognize this kind of item. The solid lightning powder. Fuxi chuckled. He slightly shook his palm, and an invisible force arranged the powder and turned it into the shape of a palm, as tall as a person. In the Heavenly Thunder Plane, Zen had collected a massive amount of solid lightning powder, just in case. Fuxi had just taken out half of it. What does the solid lightning powder do? Sawyer asked curiously. Fuxi looked up at the sky. A mark of 8 diagrams appeared in the void, which was also the central area where most of the earthly dragon snakes gathered. Have you heard of the Heavenly Thunder Plane? He asked. Of course, Sawyer replied, nodding. It is the thunderbolts from there. With that, Fuxi launched a palm strike upwards. In a flash, the palm formed by the solid lightning powder suddenly disappeared and reappeared on the 8 diagrams, striking at it. Pop! On impact, the 8 diagrams broke in a flash of dazzling lightning. Chapter 3569, Desperate. The solid lightning powder was undoubtedly powerful. The primeval Lord of Heaven had used it to kill the divine retribution beast that had once hunted the human race. The terrifying lightning exploded, radiating in all directions like a supernova. Buzz. The explosion was so loud that it started sounding like a piercing shriek, leaving everyone's ears ringing. For a moment, no one could see clearly. They could only see a white light. Everything was shrouded in the white light, including the earth and sky. After a long time, the white light dissipated, making everything visible again. The earthly dragon snakes were gone. A large part of them were killed by the lightning released by the solid lightning powder. The others fell to the ground, some killed by the shock waves, some just stunned unconscious. Without any hesitation, the heavenly Eye-Vine now rushed forward. The bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits had already arrived a little way ahead of Zen's group. They had been about to attack when they were spooked still by the lightning in the sky. What kind of skill was that? What horrible lightning! The color and power looked familiar. Did they bring the lightning from the Heavenly Thunder Plane? Because of the lightning, the space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men had hesitated to approach Zen's group. The heavenly Eye-Vine wasted no time taking advantage of the lull and climbed up to the 5th stair. Should we stop them? The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit asked. What if they use that lightning skill again? The bull-headed man with golden horns said with a frown. The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit thought for a moment. Let's just follow them for now. Let's wait and see if other races will attack them. Most of the races in the Grand Pure Realm were chasing Zen's group. If the races that didn't know their true strength exhausted them, the space-manipulating spirits and the bull-headed men would be able to catch them easily. This was a much safer plan. Good idea, the bull-headed man with golden horns agreed. The two races thus decided not to stop Zen and the others themselves. Instead, they maintained a certain distance from them and followed them all the way. The width of the 5th stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau was less than a tenth of that of the 1st stair, and the 6th stair was even narrower. The 7th stair was a platform of hundreds of thousands of feet wide. The heavenly Eye-Vine quickly passed through the 5th stair and went straight to the 6th. On the other side of the Sky Ladder Plateau, a large number of creatures from other races began to pour in. More and more races joined the chase. They didn't cooperate with each other as the Eternal Realm Hunters thought. Time was short and they hated each other very much. Although everyone's goal was to catch Zen and his group, they were also still wary against each other. Even two races that were approaching together maintained a considerable distance from each other. Clatter, clatter, clatter. The temperature at the top of the sky ladder plateau started to drop. Thick snow had piled up on the plain, covering everything in a blanket of white. After passing the 6th stair, the heavenly eye vine climbed up rapidly along the mountain sides of the 7th. The 3 Eternal Realm Hunters, the Snake Goddess, Fuxi and the others now looked a little nervous. If the wind blew from the Purple Wind Gorge, the Sky Ladder Plateau would be a dead end. There would be no possibility of escape. After the Heavenly Eye Vine reached the 7th stair, Thurston, Sawyer, Fuxi and the Snake Goddess held their breath and looked worriedly ahead. There was a huge and open valley in the distance. In the valley, they could see a faint purple wind floating up and down like silk. "The wind is rising," Fuxi murmured. The Snake Goddess frowned. This was a difficult problem she could find no solution for. A feeling of doom hung over Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasmin and the Eternal Realm Hunters. They couldn't cross the Purple Wind Gorge if the wind raged at them. All the creatures in the air would be sucked into the deep gorge, and there was no possibility of survival. The wind in the Purple Wind Gorge was famously insurmountable. "Can't we fly above it?" Zen asked, staring at the purple wind. Pearson scoffed at that. He couldn't imagine how Zen became so powerful while knowing so little about the 3 Purities stage. If you fly over the Purple Wind Gorge, the purple wind will blow up. As long as the wind blows, this is a dead end. You shouldn't have chosen this path in the first place. Fuxi, the Snake Goddess and the others frowned. Their faces darkened as they realized they had made a mistake. "I see." Zen raised his eyebrows but didn't look flustered at all. "How ignorant you are." Pearson felt even more embittered now. He regretted that he had sympathized with Thurston and Sawyer and followed these humans. The Heavenly Eye Vine knew what they were talking about, but it remained silent. From the moment it handed over its life source, it no longer had control over itself. Not long after they arrived at the edge of the Purple Wind Gorge, they spotted some creatures climbing up the stair. There was a group of palm-sized but fully armed mouse-shaped creatures. There were dozens of other creatures covered in the mist. There were 4 giants like withered trees, more than 200 feet tall. There were 2 kings of diabolic demons radiating with murderous intent. The bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits also showed up. But this time, they did not charge in. The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit had been betting on the other races to tire out Zen and his group, but they were not so stupid. Since Zen and his group were wanted by the element spirit civilization, they knew they were definitely not weak. "You destroyed the diabolic earth and killed my clansmen, you brat. You'll pay for that today." One of the diabolic demons took 2 steps forward, looking like he could swallow Zen in one gulp. When the other creatures heard this, their expressions changed slightly. "The diabolic earth has been destroyed," one of the giants asked carefully. The diabolic earth was now as quiet as death. No one dared to go and have a look, so only a few people knew about it. "Humph." The diabolic demons didn't answer. "Did they destroy it?" the giant pressed. "Yes, it's that brat." The king gritted his teeth and pointed at Zen. Hearing this, the creatures started to stir uncomfortably. The diabolic demons were among the top 3 most powerful races in the Grand Pure Realm. It was near impossible to kill them. All this time, they thought Zen, who had defeated Holly, just had a powerful physique. It seemed that the information they got was completely inaccurate. Although surprised at this development, the creatures did not retreat. After all, they still had the advantage of numbers. However, they were all now waiting for another to take action first. Even the diabolic demons could only seethe in silence and glare at Zen. They were left in a stalemate. All the people on the Heavenly Eye Vine looked grave, while Zen remained composed. The stalemate was broken moments later, however, as Zen sensed something. He suddenly looked at the Purple Wind Gorge behind him. "Master Fuxi, please get the solid lightning powder ready." Chapter 3570, The Stone Spirits. Faced with such a dire situation, they had no way of retreating. Without hesitation, Fuxi brought out the solid lightning powder. Splash! With just a slight shake of his hand, the scattered granules of the solid lightning powder clumped together as if by an invisible force and turned into a huge palm. This palm was even bigger than the previous one. When the bull-headed man with golden horns and the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit saw the palm, their eyes narrowed slightly. Although they had never seen this before, but something about it attracted attention. The other bull-headed men subconsciously took a few steps back. They didn't know how the solid lightning powder could channel the lightning from the heavenly thunder plane, but its power was still quite terrifying. Whoever took action first would be blasted into pieces by the lightning. The bull-headed men and the space-manipulating spirits were at an advantage now. They had seen the power of the solid lightning powder before. And at the moment, they were waiting for those who had no idea about the power to charge forward. However, it was natural that the creatures that could survive in the harsh environment of the three purities stage would not be so stupid. As soon as Fuxi brought out the powder, they immediately went on high alert. "What is that?" a giant asked. "I have no idea," another giant replied, shaking his head. "Everyone, be careful, retreat slowly, we need to be careful." The mouse-shaped creatures began to retreat. The other creatures followed suit. "These people are just playing tricks on you. You all are incredibly powerful in the Grand Pure Realm. Why are you so scared of them?" The blue-haired space-manipulating spirit asked loudly. Let alone the giant creatures, even the small mouse-shaped creatures would not be easy to deal with. True to their shape, these creatures were known as the terror mice. The destructive power of their seemingly small bodies was easily about 1/5 of what the bull-headed men were packing. Moreover, their number was much larger than that of the bull-headed men. "Why don't you attack them first if you are so sure?" one of the terror mice asked. They weren't the only ones who were displeased. Other creatures also cast unfriendly gazes at the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit. She was way too cunning for comfort. Time passed by. The two sides were at a stalemate. "They dare not attack us," Fuxi remarked from the middle of the vine. His hand was raised and he would have sent out the powder any time. "It's not that they do not dare," the snake goddess shook her head in negation. "Rather, they are not of one mind. They each have their own plans about dealing with us and they can't come to a single decision." "Yeah, the problem is, every single one of them wants to pay less and get more in return," Yasmin replied, shaking her head with a sneer. But there was a hint of sadness in her smile. She had just regained her freedom and would have liked to see Dorothy. However, it seemed like she had no chance at the moment. "Zen, do you have some ideas? You look rather calm," Eastern Emperor Tai suddenly asked through telepathy. His lips had moved slightly, but his words were heard clearly by everyone on the heavenly eye vine. Zen thought for a moment and then replied in affirmation, "Yes, I do have an idea. When I say, you grab the heavenly eye vine." Everyone was confused when they heard his words. How could he escape from such a dire situation? The snake goddess looked at Zen sideways. She guessed that there was a chance he might have received the primeval Lord of Heaven's guidance. Since the primeval Lord of Heaven had the power and the skill to make the solid lightning powder in the heavenly thunder plane, perhaps he also had a way of dealing with the purple wind gorge. In any case, Zen's words did calm everyone down a little. In fact, Thurston and Sawyer were no longer worried. They fully trusted Zen. There was a strange look in Pearson's eyes though. The Eternal Realm hunters weren't the targets of the element spirit civilization. If the creatures did decide to attack them later on, he would easily find a way to take Thurston and Sawyer away. As for the humans, he was already being rather kind by not adding insult to injury. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Just then, a group of earthly dragon snakes also climbed to the seventh stair. In the last attack, although Fuxi's solid lightning powder had proven incredibly effective and powerful, it hadn't killed them all. Instead, most of them had passed out because of the shock wave. After a long time, they had woken up and were chasing after them once again. That did not mean that they were unharmed. They had suffered a great loss due to the solid lightning powder. When they saw it in front of Fuxi, they instinctively felt scared. However, they did not tell other creatures about the power of the powder. Instead, they carefully retreated to a side and hid their poisonous jaws. It was time for some other tactic instead of a head-on collision. Very soon, a few more creatures came. The already small seventh stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau was becoming rather crowded now. But when the last team finally came up, the eyes of all the creatures present lit up as if they had found salvation. The final team comprised of several round stone creatures, known as the Stone Spirits. These creatures were extremely powerful and known to possess infinite amounts of strength. Strictly speaking, the Stone Spirits were under complete control of the Element Spirit civilization. The Element Spirit civilization had always treated these spirits in a special manner, and they had maintained a good relationship since a long time ago. However, the Stone Spirits' intelligence was extremely low. They had no strategic ideas and could be easily cheated, which meant they weren't of much use on their own. After the announcement of the bounty, the Stone Spirits had come here in a hurry, but they weren't here for the bounty. They just wanted to help the Element Spirit civilization. Thump, thump, thump. After the stone spirits climbed up one by one, they fixed their eyes on Zen and his group. No one spoke or gave any orders to them. Instead, as if they were pre-programmed robots, they acted on their own. The stone spirits marched forward and rushed towards Zen and his group. Thump, thump, thump. Fuxi, the snake goddess, and the others saw the stone spirits coming their way, and they immediately had a bad feeling about that. The other creatures were unwilling to make a move first because they were suspicious of each other. The stone spirits, however, were simple-minded. And if they were ridiculed by the other creatures and goaded into attacking Zen and his group, they would instantly attack. And who could deal with their attacks? The situation right now was even worse than they had imagined. The stone spirits had instantly rushed towards them right after arriving there. Thump, thump, thump. The stone spirits rushed over in unison, and the ground of the seventh stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau began to tremble from their march. Zen, aren't you ready yet? Fuxi called out anxiously. It was a matter of life and death now, and he had become very serious. Zen frowned and said, now's not the time. Then I guess we'll have to fight. Fuxi's palm shook slightly, and a mark of the 8 diagrams suddenly appeared and began floating in the middle of the stone spirits. Let me fight first, Pearson said as he stepped forwards. He waved his hands gently and his arms turned into spider threads that swept towards the stone spirits. The stone spirits who were wrapped by the spider threads immediately stopped as if they had lost all of their strength and willpower. Within a few seconds, Pearson's entire body had turned into spider threads and wrapped up the stone spirits. The stone spirits were totally motionless now. Seeing that the stone spirits had been stopped, the other creatures began to make their moves now. The ones who were shrouded in the mist made the first move. As they stretched out their hands, waves of white mist began floating towards the bodies of the stone spirits. When the mist had completely enveloped the stone spirits, it turned purple. These creatures could control several forms of mist, and each of them had a different effect. The red blood mist had the power to confuse the enemy, the yellow poison mist was highly toxic, the green spiritual mist could generate white bones and muscles, the purple mist could corrode everything. It was undoubtedly not easy to corrode the stone spirits. Moreover, the mist creatures hadn't launched a heavy attack this time. Their main goal was to corrode the spider threads wrapped around the stone spirits' bodies. Pearson's body, which was in the form of spider threads, would be corroded into nothingness very soon. However, as soon as the purple mist was formed, Pearson sensed the danger and immediately pulled back the spider threads to form his body. Even though his reaction had been extremely fast, the spider threads had broken down at several places. If he had moved just a little later, he would have been completely corroded by the purple mist. As soon as the spider threads were removed, the stone spirits began moving once again. Chapter 3571, The Green Wind. After some of Pearson's threads were corroded, he grew a little weak. Looking at the stone spirits with a pale face, he shook his head. I've tried my best, but I can't stop them. He wanted to take Sawyer and Thurston away, but the two brothers' serious demeanor made him hesitate. Thump, thump, thump. While the stone spirits seemed to be slow in movement, they were actually quickly rushing forward, making the ground tremble. In the distance, the creatures held their breaths. They were looking for an opportunity to make their move, but first, they had to carefully observe the human skills. Fuxi narrowed his eyes at the sight of the stone spirits growing closer and closer. Finally, he couldn't restrain himself any longer and stretched out his hand to make a smack. The palm condensed by the solid lightning powder appeared among the stone spirits and collided with the 8 diagrams mark, now emitting a snow-white light. Almost all the creatures were enveloped by the light, they had to shield their eyes with their hands. Following the flash of light, there was a dense and indistinct sound of thunder, like the piercing pitch of a sharp object tearing at a surface. The power that surged had all the mist creatures and terror mice quickly retreat. Some of them even jumped from the 7th stair to the 6th. After a while, the lightning finally dissipated. Once everyone recovered their sight, they saw the stone spirits in the center of the open space lying on the ground. Most of their bodies were completely charred, their hands and feet were chopped to pieces, and some figures were even smashed into powder. How horrible, a terror mouse remarked while climbing up from the 6th stair, getting a peek at the scene. It was the heavenly thunder plains lightning. How did he make it? The mist creatures exchanged glances, confused. It has something to do with the powder, shouted a giant. Then, the others began yelling as well, making the other creatures cast a cold glance at them. Anyone with a discerning eye could easily see that it had something to do with the powder in Fuxi's hand. They wondered if he still had any with him. On the ground lay the stone spirits that could no longer get up. They gathered so densely that all of them were enveloped by the lightning. None of them managed to escape. Silence filled the seventh stair. All the creatures' eyes were on Fuxi. It seemed like the lightning was the human's best trump card. The powder was supposedly highly rare, so it was likely to be limited. If Fuxi didn't have any left, the situation would be simple. Noticing all the creatures staring at him, Fuxi couldn't help but feel a tad bit embarrassed. He undoubtedly knew what they were thinking. But now, he had used up all the solid lightning powder. He couldn't use it again. While Fuxi stood stiff, the snake goddess suddenly turned to Pearson. Eternal Realm Hunter, you still have some brown divine thunder powder. Please bring it out. What was that divine thunder powder? Before Thurston and Sawyer could even comprehend what she said, Pearson knew exactly what the snake goddess was referring to. With a flip of his hand, brown powder began pouring out. It wasn't the solid lightning powder, but the bone coagulating powder that had been used to destroy the space-manipulating spirit's endless corridor. The two kinds of powder looked exactly the same. Both were brown, but their auras were completely different. One contained the power of lightning, while the other contained the power of space. One's spiritual sense could pick out the difference. But as an Eternal Realm Hunter, Pearson was experienced. When he poured out the bone coagulating powder, he hid its aura ingeniously. Seeing what Pearson did, the snake goddess seemed appreciative. It was no wonder that the Eternal Realm Hunters could stay in the Three Purities stage for such a long time. Their reactions were rather quick. Coincidentally, Pearson had just obtained quite an amount of bone coagulating powder. It turned into a palm as tall as 10 feet and stood before Fuxi. The sight rendered the creatures speechless. Previously, the brown palm wasn't as large as the current one, but it had still managed to annihilate all the stone spirits with its immense power. Just how terrifying would this brown palm be? Just like what happened the last time, no one dared to make a move. But while Pearson and Fuxi's cooperation was flawless, there were still some doubts. The golden-horned bull-headed man knew that Thurston, Pearson, and Sawyer were the Eternal Realm Hunters from the very beginning. Although they weren't humans, when the snake goddess asked Pearson for the powder, Thurston and Sawyer looked completely stunned and unaware of the powder. It was all too strange. Even stranger was the fact that Pearson had deliberately hidden the brown powder's aura. The bull-headed man quietly sent his analysis to the blue-haired space-manipulating spirit. The latter agreed, but she sneered as she asked, "Will you dare to launch an attack? If you want, I'll send you there." The bull-headed man merely glared at her and said nothing. While he was indeed suspicious, he didn't have to risk his life over it. But the situation couldn't go on as such. Soon, some of the creatures came up with an idea. They asked each of the races to gather some creatures and set up an attack together. The plan was acceptable enough for all the races to agree. Seeing how the creatures prepared for a new attack, Fuxi and the rest pulled a long face. They were still facing an impasse, after all. No one was attacking them yet, but who could tell when they would need their defenses up before the wind in the Purple Wind Gorge came to a halt. As quickly as possible, the creatures selected a number of daredevils. These daredevils were to test the powder in Fuxi's hands. If it was truly the solid lightning powder, they would undoubtedly die. But the leader's orders were to be strictly followed without complaints. After forming a new team, they were ready to make a move. Fuxi frowned. The 8 diagrams mark was now floating before him as the great palm was ready to slap at any time. The selected daredevils' bodies trembled violently. If the palm exploded, they would undoubtedly die. "Are you courting death?" When Fuxi roared, the mark of the 8 diagrams began rotating. Seeing that he was actually going to slap the palm, the daredevils who were determined to sacrifice themselves stopped simultaneously, some of them even stepping back. But Fuxi didn't dare to use the palm. Otherwise, the creatures would find out it wasn't the solid lightning powder. Zen's calm expression shifted, a trace of anxiety filling his eyes. While he had hidden it well, the snake goddess had sensed it. What he was waiting for hadn't arrived. But a great battle could spark at any moment. It's fake. He wouldn't dare to use the powder. This is their last life-saving straw. Attack them. We aren't cowards. At this point, the leaders began encouraging the daredevils. While the daredevils were unwilling, they continued to grit their teeth and rush forward. Regardless of what means Fuxi used, he couldn't scare the daredevils away. Suddenly, Zen sensed something. At the far end of the Purple Wind Gorge, a purple wind mixed with a green wind, the latter rolling and dancing, approaching rapidly. "Master Fuxi, use the palm," Zen suddenly called out. "Why?" Fuxi asked in return, stunned. "Do as I say," Zen firmly ordered. While Fuxi didn't appreciate Zen's tone, he didn't dare to ignore his command at the critical moment of life and death. And so he struck the giant palm made from the bone coagulating powder. Chapter 3572, Giant Hawk. The bone coagulating powder and the solid lightning powder were similar in appearance, but their properties were vastly different. After the palm formed by the bone coagulating powder spread out, it exploded out into the air with a terrific roar. Normally, a small quantity of bone coagulating powder could freeze the space channel and cause it to collapse, but a large amount of bone coagulating powder could even affect ordinary space. The space around the group of daredevils suddenly became viscous. These daredevils now looked as if they were moving through heavy oil, and their movements slowed and became somewhat comical. At least, this was how it appeared to those who saw them, but to the daredevils trapped in the space, it didn't feel funny at all. They felt that their surroundings had changed, and all their hopes were shattered. It's all over. This is the end. We are doomed. Self-sacrifice for our race. Every race had different values their members lived by, but each member had their own thoughts. However, this viscous feeling lasted for only 6 seconds and then it vanished. Everything returned to normal. They looked down at their bodies and hands, and there was an undisguised relief on their confused faces. It's fake. That's the bone coagulating powder. It's known for destroying space. They don't have any more of that powder which they used before. The daredevils immediately reacted, and the eyes of the non-human creatures in the distance blazed with fury. Squeak, squeak. The terror mice let out terrifying squeaks. While they had been standing randomly, they now suddenly lined up orderly. They piled together according to some unspoken rule, 3 to a group, or 5, or 7, and then they charged forward. Thump, thump, thump. The giants also barged ahead. Although their movements were cumbersome, they could cover a huge distance with a single step. For them, a span of hundreds of thousands of feet was only a few steps. The mist creatures drifted forward. The blue-haired spirit and the golden-horned bull-headed man also became anxious. They hadn't even considered that the brown powder in their opponents' hands could be fake. In particular, the blue-haired spirit wanted to slap herself a few times. After all, she had suffered the effects of the bone coagulating powder before, and she should have considered this possibility in advance. However, they still had a chance. Anyway, Zen and his group couldn't escape. But it never occurred to them that their thinking was flawed. As the warriors from many races began their headlong rush, a hint of green arose from the purple wind gorge. At the same time, wisps of purple wind stirred from the purple wind gorge. These purple winds were the most lethal catchers on the Grand Pure Realm, but they couldn't capture the green shadow. Only once the green shadow had completely risen did the warriors from many races see its form clearly. It was a huge hawk. His feathers, which looked as if they were carved out of jade, were crystal clear, fluttering in the wind. As the purple wind held closer, it actually swept over the hawk's feathers, however, it could do nothing to the giant hawk. The Wing King. When Pearson saw the huge creature, he became very excited. It was strange that Pearson was familiar with the Wing King, but on second thought, it made perfect sense to Zen. The regal jade civilization that the Wing King once led had also been a mighty ruling civilization. However, following the battle with the Nihility race, he had been left no choice but to lead the regal jade civilization to hide away in the Lust world. Their choices were identical to those of the human race, but there were still more human elites trapped on the Three Purities stage. When the snake goddess, Fuxi, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others saw this huge hawk, which seemed to be carved from jade, their eyes widened with awe. He could freely soar in the purple wind gorge. Was this where Zen's confidence came from? Crack, crack. The Wing King stretched out his pair of razor talons and grabbed the heavenly eye vine, like a hawk catching a snake. The difference was that the heavenly eye vine was unequivocal about its own situation and remained compliantly motionless. Stop that bird! Squeak, 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 squeak. The terror mice roared and hurled their weapons at the giant hawk in a frenzy. The mist creatures also twirled their black hooks, trying to grapple with Zen and the others and bring them back. Seeing that these warriors of the various races were all attacking ferociously, the Wing King flapped his great wings and flew hard ahead. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Strong winds suddenly and violently blew on the 7th stair of the Sky Ladder Plateau. If it had just been a gust of wind, it wouldn't have mattered. The warriors present weren't afraid of the Wing King. Over the years, they had encountered many powerful warriors from the ruling civilizations. The problem was that this was the Purple Wind Gorge. It was unquestionable that the Wing King could avoid the purple wind. What escalated the situation was that when he beat his wings powerfully to create a strong wind, he inevitably attracted the purple wind from the Purple Wind Gorge to rear up at the same time. Almost all of the warriors now had terror in their eyes. Earlier, those daredevils had been fortunate to survive, but now that they had rushed to the front, they couldn't avoid the purple wind this time. The purple wind draped around the daredevils like silk and dragged them towards the purple wind gorge. It wasn't merely the group of daredevils who proved unlucky. The terror mice and the mist creatures who had just rushed forward were also tangled in the purple wind. No matter the length of their struggles or what theurgy they used, none could break free. Noticing how unfavorable the situation was for them, the warriors from other races could only beat a hot retreat. In the end, they could only watch the Wind King rise into the air and flap off towards the purple wind gorge. Swish, 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 swish. The purple wind in the purple wind gorge was like a silken banner which had its own awareness, and it was crazily chasing after the Wind King. However, the Wind King was very familiar with the patterns of the purple wind, so he didn't struggle to avoid them. The purple wind couldn't touch him at all, and of course, it couldn't touch the heavenly eye vine in his claws either. Zen, you scared me. I didn't expect you to possess such a trump card. Fuxi gasped for breath. The snake goddess, King Yayan, Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasamin, and the others also felt intense relief. The snake goddess had believed that it would be the primeval lord of heaven who would make a move, but she didn't expect the Wind King of the regal jade civilization would come. The top of the heavenly eye vine was lifted high, and Pearson was standing at the top, speaking with the Wind King. Thurston and Sawyer had just allayed the crowd's doubts. When the regal jade civilization had explored the Grand Pure Realm back then, there had once been a regal jade spirit who became lost. Later, the Wind King led their race to escape and hide in Stage 13. The regal jade spirit that went missing didn't know about it, so he became a stray of the regal jade civilization, wandering outside. By chance, this regal jade spirit had become an eternal realm hunter. He had a good relationship with Pearson, and they were as close to each other as brothers. Unfortunately, this regal jade spirit died at the hands of the Nihility race. Before he died, he entrusted Pearson to help him find the regal jade civilization. It had proven impossible for Pearson, who had continuously been exploring the Three Purities stage, to find the regal jade civilization that had been hiding on Stage 13. However, Pearson hadn't expected that he would meet the Wind King of the regal jade civilization at this time. It was not difficult to imagine how excited he was. Chapter 3573, No Turning Back. Pearson told the Wind King the story of the regal jade spirit in detail. The Wind King was silent for a while before he sighed and said, "It looks like Deshaun had done a lot of things after we left. It's my fault. We shouldn't have left him behind." Deshaun enjoyed a status that was almost the same with the regal jade spirit in Zen's body. He was also the core figure of the regal jade civilization and the Wind King's right-hand man. Deshaun didn't regret anything or blame you. He just wanted me to tell you everything he had done, Pearson said. The Wind King nodded and said, "I see. I hope, one day, you can take me to the place where he died." "Yes, I will," Pearson said, folding his hands in respect. He was also a man who valued friendship. He wouldn't otherwise have risked his life to stay with Thurston and Sawyer. Zen and his group were chased all over by all the warriors from other races in the Grand Pure Realm. No other place in the Grand Pure Realm was more dangerous than where he was staying with them. But there was now something more important to do, which was why they couldn't immediately visit Deshaun's resting place to pay tribute to him. Whoosh! More gusts of purple wind swept over them. The purple wind had completely occupied the space in the middle of the purple wind gorge. No one knew what kind of method the Wind King had used. He could always find space in the purple wind and dodge it. And no matter how close the purple wind was to him, it could never wrap itself around him. The heavenly eye vine was also trembling in the Wind King's claws. Thanks to their keen senses, Fuxi, the snake goddess, and the others could perceive that this trembling was actually a strange bodily movement technique, which was the secret method to avoid the purple wind. Zen didn't care about these details. He stared at the purple wind and asked, "There is no purple wind on normal days. What's it like at the bottom of the purple wind gorge?" "There is a kind of shellfish that is very weak," answered the Wind King. "After taking root at the bottom of the purple wind gorge, they can't move for a lifetime, which is why they lack the means to find food. Fortunately, as creatures of Stage 33, these shellfish also have a strange theurgy." "Is the purple wine their bloodline theurgy?" Zen asked. "Yes," the Wind King continued. "These shellfish release the purple wind, but it's not to seal off the purple wind gorge or to deal with the warriors from other races above. They are just hunting for food. They release the purple wind to hunt for food when they begin to reproduce. The warriors from other races that fell down have all become their food." "It's really amazing," Zen murmured. As for how the Wing King avoided the purple wind, Zen didn't ask. When he had started to decide the route in the beginning, Zen had known that the Wing King had entered the three purities stage from the regal jade spirit in his body. The civilization artifact of the regal jade civilization could sense the position of the Wing King. The regal jade spirit had told Zen with certainty that the Wing King could easily take the group through the purple wind gorge. Now, it seemed that everything had come through even though there had been a little trouble in the process. Did you choose the winding road? The Wing King asked again. The Wing King had once led many of the Eternal Realm warriors of the regal jade civilization to advance into the Supreme Pure Realm. But they failed when they were 400 miles from the Supreme Pure Realm. The regal jade civilization was strong enough. They had merely chosen a different path. At the time, the Wing King had been in a hurry to prove himself. After entering the three purities stage, he had led his people towards the Supreme Pure Realm through the Flame Road. The Flame Road was a very difficult road. There were very few people who chose this road to enter the Supreme Pure Realm. At the time, the Wing King had overestimated the strength of the element spirit civilization, which was why he had suffered a great defeat. If the Wing King hadn't been in a hurry, it would not have been impossible for him to enter the Supreme Pure Realm. Yes, Wing King, said the snake goddess, folding her hands towards him in respect. I've heard that the winding road is a dangerous road. Are you sure you will succeed? The Wing King asked again. They had failed near the entrance of the Flame Road, which was a pain he would never get rid of in his lifetime. It had made him extremely sensitive to these roads. We passed successfully, said Fuxi proudly. The Wing King nodded, but his expression soon turned gloomy. That's good. I failed when I had the chance. It's not that your strength wasn't enough. You just didn't have a thorough understanding of these roads at the time, the snake goddess said, trying to reassure him. The creatures on the other shore knew more about the three purities stage with the passing of time. Just like the mysterious veil had been pulled down bit by bit, the creatures that had later tried had become more familiar with these roads. It would now naturally be easier to pass through them. I think I can benefit from your success this time and enter the Supreme Pure Realm with you, the Wing King added. A smile appeared on the snake goddess's face. Wing King, you are being modest. Swoosh. As the wide wings of the Wing King flapped fiercely, the group of people in the purple wind sped up again. After a few minutes, the Wing King began to rise upwards. He flew upwards for a while before emerging from the purple wind. Towards everyone's left was a cliff that stretched for thousands of miles. On the right was an endless plain. Once the Wing King put the heavenly eye vine down, Zen began to look at the scenery in the distance, a strange expression soon crossing his face. I'm now standing in the north and facing the south, Zen said, pointing at the plain in front of him. If I keep going along this plain, won't I reach the south of the Grand Pure Realm? To put it more simply, if this plain was the center of the Grand Pure Realm, they could have reached this place if they had gone up along the Divine River and then crossed it after they came out of the flaming maple forest. They needn't have spent so much effort in going around it. That's not a plain, the snake goddess said, walking up to him. It's just an illusion. The entrance is over there. The snake goddess pointed at a place a little distance away. There were 2 rows of inconspicuous fences. A simple entrance sat in between these 2 rows of fences. Zen frowned at this sight. The fences weren't remarkable, but Zen should have noticed them. The fact that they hadn't struck him was strange. If we had walked through the plain, the only road to the Supreme Pure Realm would be through the entrance between these 2 rows of fences. The snake goddess stretched out her slender fingers and drew a line in the air. If you don't walk through this road and try to pass through other places on both sides, you will be lost forever in this endless plain. Is this illusion that powerful? Zen raised his eyebrows. As the snake goddess nodded, the primeval Lord of Heaven's voice rang out in Zen's mind. This plain is not an illusion. If it weren't an illusion, we could just come out of the plain by retracing our steps. Why would we be lost forever? Zen asked in his mind. The primeval Lord of Heaven chuckled. Those who enter the plain can no longer turn around. The thoughts of all of the people who enter the plain will change irreversibly and they will lose the ability of turning back. Is turning back also a kind of ability? Zen was speechless. Yes, and changing your thoughts doesn't mean modifying your memories. It's by making you not realize you have this ability of turning around, so that you can only move forward permanently. You know something is wrong, but you will never be able to figure out what it is, the primeval Lord of Heaven explained, shrugging. This is indeed a miraculous plane. It can suppress the thoughts and logic of all living beings. Chapter 3574, Treacherous Beings. Zen did not pursue the topic about the plane's magic ability. He went to the entrance, which was 2 rows of fences, with the others. The fences seemed to have existed for a long time as they looked utterly decayed. There were exquisite carvings on the surface of the fences, and they were rotten as well. Upon closer look, Zen noticed that there was a complete carving on top of a post, but a film of dust covered a part of it. Just as he was about to brush it off, Fuxi looked at him in horror and said, "Zen, don't touch this fence." Zen's fingers stopped 1 inch before the fence and he asked, "Why?" "There's something ominous about the fences. Anyone who touches them can't get out of the winding road," Fuxi said with certainty. Zen raised one brow. Is that so? He didn't believe Fuxi, but everything was possible on the other shore. Perhaps, the fences did have something to do with the winding road. In the end, he did not touch the fence. At that moment, the heavenly eye vine extended a thin branch and gently touched his forehead, then passed its thoughts to him. I've already sent you here. Can I leave now?" it said. Zen had forced the heavenly eye vine to come with them, and its life source was still in his hands. He glanced at the heavenly eye vine's large pupil and said, "As far as I know, you can only go through the silent path if you go back from here. Do you think those races will let you go?" The heavenly eye vine was also a member of those races. The problem was that those warriors had thought that it had shifted to Zen's side. Even in ordinary times, it was hard for it to survive alone without the arrow demons. Now, those races were already enraged at what it did, so the chances of them letting the heavenly eye vine go were quite small. The vine thought for a while and answered, "No, they won't." "Then what's your plan?" Zen asked again. I'd better follow you." In reality, the heavenly eye vine didn't want to follow Zen and his group. After all, the winding road was dangerous and full of strange things. Furthermore, it was hard for it to survive alone due to its current state, even if it did reach the supreme pure realm. "If everyone is ready, come with us. It is said that the winding road is very mysterious and terrifying. I think everyone here must have known about it except for Zen, right?" Fuxi announced. In turn, Zen's eye twitched and he glared at Fuxi. "The winding road is indeed dangerous, but it's actually quite simple once we discover its secret. That is also why we chose it," Fuxi explained as he turned around and walked towards the road between the 2 rows of fences. "Everyone, please follow me closely. I'm sure we can pass safely," he continued. Swish, swish, swish. The heavenly eye vine immediately followed behind Fuxi. It was afraid of being left behind. But when it went to the front, the others got squeezed out of the line. Fuxi looked helplessly at the heavenly eye vine and said, "Do you want to stay in my spirit beast bag?" Fortunately, his spirit beast bag was large enough to hold the heavenly eye vine. However, most creatures refused to stay in a spirit beast bag unless the bag's owner was someone they highly trusted. Perhaps the dangerous winding road intimidated the heavenly eye vine so much, that it quickly stretched out a thin vine then touched Fuxi's head, sending him the message that it had agreed to his suggestion. Afterward, Fuxi released the augury dog from the spirit beast bag and put the heavenly eye vine inside it. They also needed the augury dog to pass through the winding road, and he had planned to release him anyway. Then, they walked into the path between the fences one after another. The Wing King's body was too large, so he shrunk himself before he proceeded. Yet, nothing changed after they went in. There was still the endless plain in the distance. On one side was a cliff, and on the other was the end of the Purple Wind Gorge. As for the 2 rows of fences, they were like rows of wood lined up on the plain, which did not mean anything. But after they traveled some more, a faint white fog appeared around them. The further they moved, the thicker the white fog was. Zen looked back and found that both the cliff and the Purple Wind Gorge disappeared. However, the 2 rows of fences were still there, and their positions just annoyed them. "The road between the fences is closed?" Zen asked in a low voice. There were 2 rows of fences before, but now they became one as if by magic. "Don't ask," the snake goddess hissed. Just then, her eyes glowed red, as if she tried to infuse the shadow of snake goddess into her eyes. He wondered what she saw when she did that. But since she told him not to ask, he just stayed quiet. Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasmin, and the 3 Eternal Realm Hunters were also confused, but they followed the snake goddess and Fuxi obediently. They walked for a little more, then a cabin with a spire appeared in the thick fog. When they got closer, Zen saw that it was a thatched hut. The thatched hut had no doors, so he couldn't see what was inside. The moment they approached it, however, they felt extremely uncomfortable. To the people who had held high positions for a long time like Eastern Emperor Tai and Yasmin, the sensation felt like an uncontrollable urge to kill each other. Still, they were in a mysterious place, so they restrained themselves. As soon as they passed the thatched hut, everyone could restrict the strange feeling inside them. However, 2 more thatched huts appeared in front of them. All the thatched huts were closed, but the creatures inside had given them an unpleasant feeling. Driven by curiosity and uneasiness, King Yayan could not help but ask, what exactly is inside them? Don't ask, the snake goddess stated again. King Yayan's soybean-like eyes flashed, but it couldn't do anything but continue to move forward. When they passed by another neat row of thatched huts again, Pearson suddenly stopped. You have to tell us what's inside them before we decide to move forward or not, he demanded. It wasn't that Pearson didn't trust the snake goddess, but the Eternal Realm hunters never pinned all their hopes on others. Therefore, it was better if they knew things in advance so they could deal with emergencies if there were any. The snake goddess's eyes brimmed with regret. She should have told them the rules first before entering the road, but now it was too late. It's a kind of treacherous being, she replied. Upon hearing her answer, Pearson only frowned. He already had a rough guess of what was inside the huts, and when he forced an answer out of the snake goddess, he was not surprised. On the contrary, Sawyer and Thurston blanched in fear, and it was clear that they were afraid. Meanwhile, Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasamine, King Yayan, and Zen didn't have any reaction. Even in the Supreme Pure Realm, there weren't many creatures who knew about the existence of treacherous beings. Naturally, those warriors who explored the Grand Pure Realm had never heard of them. When they saw how Sawyer and Thurston looked, however, they immediately understood that those creatures would be a challenge. Chapter 3575, A Village. Fuxi picked up the augury dog when they were passing by the neat row of thatched huts and held him in his arms. The augury dog was sensitive to all kinds of power. Now that they were on the winding road, the unpleasant aura around the place was beginning to overwhelm him. He looked sickly and weak. Every time Fuxi passed by a thatched hut with the dog in his arms, his glassy eyes glinted with obvious hostility. He probably understood that the things in the thatched huts were too strong for them, so he dared not bark wildly. Instead, he whimpered, trying not to let his voice be obvious. The augury dog continued to whimper as they walked past the first row of thatched huts. When they reached the end of the first row, Fuxi whispered to him, "Is there a thatched hut available for us?" The augury dog shook his head. Fuxi and the snake goddess exchanged a worried glance. When they had entered the winding road the last time, they had found a thatched hut in the front row pretty easily. Their luck seemed to have run out this time. All 26 thatched huts in the first row were occupied. Let's try the second row. Fuxi knew there was no time for them to lose. He hurriedly went to the second row with the augury dog in his arms. There were a lot of thatched huts in the second row as well. As before, the augury dog sniffed at each thatched hut and tried to find a safe place for them to stay. But they combed through the second row and the augury dog still couldn't find an unoccupied hut. The snake goddess blinked but didn't say a word, while Fuxi's face darkened. The third row then, he growled. The others following them remained silent, but they began to become more worried with every passing minute. It was true that Fuxi and the snake goddess had once made their way to the Supreme Pure Realm through this path. But their previous success now seemed to have stemmed out of sheer luck. And luck didn't seem to be on their side this time. If they couldn't find an available thatched hut this time, things would become hard for them, even harder than being under siege on the top of the Skyladder Plateau. There were 7 rows of thatched huts in this area, like a large village in a savage land. Fuxi took the augury dog along to check on every thatched hut in the remaining 5 rows, but to no avail. His face looked ghastly pale, as if he was terribly ill. It's getting late. The sky is much darker now, Zen reminded them, looking up at the sky. This area was covered in white mist and it was hard to tell the time, but it was obvious that the sunlight had dimmed. Fuxi looked up, alert at this news, anxiety coursing through him. They would be in great trouble once night fell. Fuxi looked like an ant in a hot pot and the snake goddess took it upon herself to console him in a calm, soft voice. There are more huts scattered around here. Let's check each of them out. There's no hurry, Fuxi. We still have time. The thatched huts in the middle of this area weren't the only ones. There were many others on the periphery. Drawing comfort from the snake goddess's words, Fuxi took a deep breath and nodded. He then walked towards the scattered thatched huts with the augury dog. He examined one thatched hut after the other but the result disappointed him yet again. The sky was already dark, night drawing close. Since we need an unoccupied thatched hut, why don't we work together to drive the treacherous being in one of the huts away? Why should we go to all this trouble to find an empty one? Eastern Emperor Tai grumbled impatiently, unable to stand it anymore. He thought that no matter how powerful the treacherous beings were, it wouldn't be a problem for them to tackle them. Even discounting Zen, all the warriors present were collectively a force to be reckoned with in the three purities stage. However, Eastern Emperor Tai had barely finished talking when a deep, angry howl suddenly sounded from the nearest thatched hut. It was hard to tell whether the voice was male or female. The howl seemed to contain an extraordinary magical power, causing everyone to cover their ears. More shrill wails followed the first howl, each emanating from a different thatched hut. The treacherous beings had begun to wake up in succession. Oh no, the augury dog in Fuxie's arms whimpered, terrified. There are several more thatched huts over there. We can give them a try, the snake goddess pointed at a corner. There were 6 or 7 thatched huts in the direction she was pointing. Fuxie didn't hesitate this time. He strode up to them, the augury dog still whimpering in his arms. The augury dog tried hard to quell his fear and sniff at each hut. When Fuxie passed by the third hut on the left, his eyes suddenly lit up with hope. Thank goodness, this one is empty, let's go in. Zen, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others were anxious as they followed. But the augury dog's words were instant in cheering all of them up. Fuxie lifted the flap of the hut and hurried inside, the others following closely behind. The thatched hut was almost as tall as the shrunken Wing King, but it was still barely tall enough to let him in. Upon noticing this, the Wing King had to shrink himself further. Only then did he dive into the hut. Fuxie didn't close the flap until the Wing King had entered the hut. All of a sudden, the piercing howls that had lingered for so long in everyone's ears died out. And thanks to this, the discomfort that had haunted everyone was now finally gone. There was nothing inside the thatched hut apart from a wooden pillar at its center. This pillar, pockmarked with several fist-sized holes, seemed to have existed for a long time and looked like it would fall apart at any time. The winding road is worthy of its name. It's terrifying enough even though we haven't encountered anything yet, King Yayan commented solemnly. Well, we wouldn't be talking like this if we had encountered something, said Fuxie with a wry smile. Yasmin breathed a sigh of relief before she asked, how long will it take us to pass through the winding road? 32 hours make for a day on the winding road. We only need to stay here for about 3 days, the snake goddess replied. Zen had zoned out and had been staring at the pillar. At the snake goddess's words, he looked around, his eyebrows raised, and said, we only need to stay safe for 3 days. The snake goddess nodded. That's all, yes, we'll stay here for 3 days and after that, we'll return the way we came. We'll then be able to enter the Supreme Pure Realm. I didn't know the winding road is such an easy path. Thurston was surprised at the rules. The Eternal Realm Hunters had their own way to reach the Supreme Pure Realm. In fact, they had more than one way. But no matter which path they took, they would have to expend full courage and strength. In contrast, the winding road seemed too easy. It can't be this simple, Sawyer said, shaking his head. If this was the case, many more creatures and Eternal Realm warriors would have chosen this path and this path wouldn't be called the strangest of all. Don't forget that there are a bunch of treacherous beings outside. At the mention of the treacherous beings, it was as if the light was turned down, given how everyone's faces paled, their hearts sinking within them. What on earth is a treacherous being? King Yayan asked curiously. Except for Fuxie, the snake goddess, and the 3 Eternal Realm Hunters, no one else knew what their enemies on the winding road were or what a treacherous being was. They have no specific form. The snake goddess paused, trying to think up the correct word to describe them. After a while, she said, it doesn't matter. When it gets darker, you'll be able to see them with your own eyes. Chapter 3576, Howls. It was already dusk and the village was being engulfed by darkness little by little. Earlier, some rays of light were strongly shooting into the thatched hut. But as the sun went down, the small hut was also enveloped in darkness. Fortunately, everyone possessed good eyes that they could still use to see their surroundings clearly, even in the pitch darkness. Wah, wah. Soon after, loud howls were heard outside. Just then, a ball of light was seen not far away. It was so bright that everyone could see it even through the thick thatches of the hut. Cover your ears quickly, Fuxie ordered urgently. Just after the ball of light appeared, piercing screams resounded. Wah, wah. After a while, the screams stopped. So, that's a treacherous being? Eastern Emperor Tai asked as he pointed at the ball of light seen roaming outside. When they looked through the thatches, they found that the ball of light had a rather irregular shape and that the piercing screams actually came from it. That's right. It seems that they have begun to move, the snake goddess replied with a nod. While they were still conversing, another treacherous being appeared from the distance. And like the first one, it also let out shrilling screams. As time passed by, more and more treacherous beings appeared. In the beginning, they were still able to bear the head-splitting howls, but as the treacherous beings grew larger in number, the howls seemed to be endless and it was as if their energies were being drained. Soon, their faces contorted badly and turned blue as they became distressed. Is it going to continue for the whole night? Zen asked in a low voice, holding his aching head. The snake goddess smiled bitterly and said, "One thing is for sure, it's just the beginning. There is a division of labor among the treacherous beings. Every night, they will gather together and howl desperately. These deafening screams could actually be heard even from faraway places. The howls had been so terrifying. If ordinary people were on the receiving end, they would surely drive them crazy. This was because it wasn't just a simple howl, but an aggressive spiritual attack. I don't think we can bear this for several hours. Is there something that we can do?" Yasmin asked with a livid face. Her heart was thumping so fast because of restlessness. "Destroy your hearing," Fuxi blurted out of nowhere. "We can still use our spiritual senses to communicate with each other. We just need to repair our hearing tomorrow morning." Fuxi's words made sense to everyone. Yasmin quickly raised her hands and stabbed her eardrums with her fingers. Her hearing was instantly destroyed as a stream of blood came out from her ears. Immediately after, her face relaxed and a clear expression of relief was seen. Without thinking twice, Eastern Emperor Tai, King Yayan, the Wing King, and the 3 Eternal Realm Hunters also followed suit and stabbed their eardrums. It would be pretty easy for them to restore their damaged hearing afterward, so there was no point in enduring a senseless struggle. It was more accurate to say that they turned off their hearing rather than destroyed them. "Zen, what about you? Can you still bear the howls?" the snake goddess asked as she took a glance at Zen. "Yes, I'm fine," Zen replied. "You don't have to be stubborn. The treacherous beings' howls go against nature. They can make you collapse. You have to destroy your hearing before it takes a greater toll on you," the snake goddess warned. "Okay," Zen answered. At this moment, the last of the treacherous beings walked past the hut and let out a sharp howl. After this, the village fell into a brief silence again. Eastern Emperor Tai and the others had already destroyed their hearing, so they didn't have any reaction to the sudden change in the surroundings. However, for Zen and the others that still had their normal hearing, the sudden tranquility didn't seem natural. Unfortunately, the silence didn't last for long. Through the thatches, they saw from a distance that the white balls of light were gathering again. In just a matter of seconds, the next wave of deafening howls resounded through the sky. Previously, the treacherous beings howled in rapid succession, but this time, they howled in groups. The sharpness was the same as before, but the power they contained was much stronger. "Woof!" The augury dog barked in a low voice and looked at Fuxi with a pitiful face. Fuxi then gently tapped the dog's ears with his fingers, and also damaged his hearing. It was the turn of Fuxi and the snake goddess to turn off their hearing. Before doing so, Fuxi turned to Zen again and said, "Why are you hesitating? Hurry up and just do it." Although Zen's endurance was much stronger than the others, he still felt tortured as the howls grew louder and louder. He decided to follow Fuxi and also stabbed his eardrums with his fingers. As he pierced his eardrums, a brief rumbling sound reverberated in his head. Then, the entire world surrounding him became quiet. There wasn't a single sound to be heard. However, just then, he felt a cool sensation hovering in his ears. Then, he realized that his hearing had completely recovered. This time, the ear-piercing howls sounded so much louder than before. It was as if the noise was drilling through his skull. When Fuxi, the snake goddess, and the others saw Zen desperately holding his head with a facial expression of excruciating pain, they were shocked and confused. "Zen, what's wrong?" the snake goddess asked through her spiritual sense. "My hearing is restored," Zen answered as he endured the pain he was experiencing. "What? How?" The snake goddess was bewildered at what just happened to him. Then, she started to realize that it must have something to do with his bloodline. "Don't tell me the bloodline restored his hearing," the snake goddess thought as she narrowed her eyes. "Wah, wah!" The treacherous beings outside once again let out a wave of high-pitched howls which seemed to be 10 times louder than before. The piercing screams started to mess up Zen's mind, so he stabbed his ears and destroyed his hearing. In an instant, he became deaf again. Just when he thought that there was silence again, his hearing was restored at a faster rate this time. The howls resounded in his ears again. "Dang it, again!" Zen stabbed his ears again. However, this time, his hearing was restored before he even felt the pain of stabbing himself in his ears. When everyone saw him repeatedly stabbing his ears, they were confused and worried. They used their spiritual senses to ask the snake goddess about what happened. After knowing what happened, they were rendered speechless, and they looked at Zen with sympathy. After stabbing his own ears for over 100 times, Zen finally chose to give up and just let the howls resound in his ears. Currently, the ancestry-level bloodline was still unable to replace him. Otherwise, it wouldn't need such a troublesome method to make him suffer. However, there must be other reasons for it to do so. Zen gritted his teeth and sat with his legs crossed. He gathered his resolve and wore a serious face. Since he couldn't avoid hearing the howls, he had no choice but to do his best to bear them. Neither Fuxi nor the snake goddess knew how devastating the treacherous being's howls could be. Every night, they would destroy their hearing before they experienced a much more intense level of the howls. An hour hadn't even passed, but the intense pain had already been unbearable for Zen. The entire night would last for 20 hours. That meant his suffering would be unimaginable. While everyone was staring at Zen with a worried face, they still maintained sharp vigilance. If the treacherous beings found out where they were hiding, it meant immediate death for them. They also had to keep watch on Zen. If the moment came that he wasn't able to control himself and started wreaking havoc because of the pain, they would need to stop him at all costs. Fortunately, Zen's pain and suffering only lasted for about 4 hours. As the painful expression on Zen's face gradually disappeared, it was replaced by a suspicious look. He knew that there was something wrong going on. The howls had changed and turned into low chanting sounds. Chapter 3577, Calling. Fuxi had been observing Zen closely the whole time. He was curious as to why Zen's pained expression gradually calmed down. "Zen, have you sealed off your hearing?" he asked through his spiritual sense. Zen was still carefully distinguishing the low chanting sounds. When he heard Fuxi's question, he shook his head and said, "No. It seems that you're not in pain anymore." At that point, Fuxi was even more surprised. "The howls are gone. The treacherous beings you mentioned seem to be chanting something now," said Zen. Fuxi arched his brows at Zen's words. "What are they chanting about?" Before they entered the winding road, he and the snake goddess prepared quite well. After all, they would die if they were not careful on their way to the supreme pure realm. When they hid in the thatched hut before, they also destroyed their hearing. However, Fuxi brought out a mouse from his spirit beast bag every once in a while, so they knew what was going on outside. The howls on the winding road were very powerful. Fuxi's mice also came from the Grand Pure Realm, and they were close relatives of the terror mice. Although they weren't rare creatures, they were by no means weak. However, after the mouse was out for less than 9 seconds, its eyes turned bloody red, then its head exploded as it struggled madly. Generally speaking, the winding road had 12 hours of daytime and 20 hours of nighttime. Fuxi released a mouse every 2 hours to test the situation. According to his experiment, the howls lasted 20 hours until dawn. It was not until daybreak, when the mouse he had released returned unharmed, that he and the snake goddess dared to restore their hearing. Based on the mice's reaction, the howls of the treacherous beings would last a whole night. However, Zen just said that the howls had stopped, which contradicted his early conclusion. He didn't believe him at all. Yet, Zen's reaction told him everything, as he didn't show any pain at all. Did something happen to the treacherous beings on the winding road? Suddenly, an idea occurred to him. He gently touched his ears, as his palm glowed green. Then, his hearing returned to normal. He had trusted Zen's reaction too much, but he forgot that Zen had a completely different type of life form after he had obtained a unique bloodline. Just as he recovered his hearing, the ear-piercing howls immediately flooded his mind. As a result, his eyes rolled back, and his body convulsed. "Do you want to die?" the snake goddess hissed madly. She quickly reached out to him and pressed on his ears. After she shut off his hearing, he stopped twitching. He had fully fainted. Then, she turned to look at Zen. "What did you do?" she asked in confusion. He and Fuxi had communicated with each other through their spiritual senses just now, so the snake goddess naturally did not know what they talked about, nor did she know why Fuxi suddenly restored his hearing. However, Zen was also confused. He said, "The treacherous beings have stopped wailing. Why did Master Fuxi still suffer?" "Stopped wailing?" The snake goddess frowned. "Maybe you heard a different sound from us," she opined. By that time, Fuxi woke up already. He released a spiritual sense that conveyed resentment. He glared at Zen and said, "You brat, do you want to kill me?" Right now, the howls of the treacherous beings were quite intense. If it wasn't for the snake goddess's quick reaction, Fuxi's soul would have gotten seriously injured. Furthermore, exposure to the howls for 5 minutes was enough to kill him. "It's my fault, Master Fuxi," Zen apologized. But what I hear are indeed chanting sounds, and the chants follow certain rules, he explained. With that, he announced his words to the crowd in the thatched hut through his spiritual sense. Chants that follow some rules. Do these treacherous beings have language? You must have misheard it. Did the whales damage your ears? The snake goddess, Fuxi, and the 3 eternal realm hunters all looked at him strangely. No one knew about the origins of the treacherous beings. They just appeared occasionally in the supreme pure realm. It seemed that some kind of creature had created them from their resentment. As for why they existed or what they came here for, no one knew. The more they couldn't figure out the treacherous beings' origins, the more they became afraid of them. I did not mishear, Zen said and shook his head. These regular chants seem to. As he spoke, his eyes suddenly glowed brightly, then he exclaimed, it appears that they are reciting Sanskrit words. The voices uttered the chants in a rhythm. Although their tone was flat and was nothing like singing, it was quite similar to reading Sanskrit words. Back then, when he was with the bald giant by the name of Pompeo, his voice was like singing, and it was also rhythmic. It turned out that the treacherous beings were not wailing, but communicating through the incomprehensible Sanskrit words. Sanskrit words? Everyone looked at each other, confused. Ha ha, forget about whether the treacherous beings know Sanskrit or not, or if the whales are a way of their communication with Sanskrit words. Even if it is, you still can't understand it, Pearson said and waved his hand. There was no way for them to confirm such speculations if they couldn't understand the language used. Thus, Pearson thought that what Zen said was nonsense. Not necessarily, the snake goddess said with a smile. He can understand it. Pearson's, Thurston's, and Sawyer's eyes widened in shock. They thought that the snake goddess must be kidding. The eternal realm hunters wandered in the 3 purities stage all year round, and they also knew a lot about Sanskrit words. It was still possible to decipher Sanskrit words that were on paper or engraved on something, but not for Sanskrit words in chants. That kind of language contained too much meaning, and it was too complicated. Furthermore, the creatures in the chaos had innate limitations. Letting them decipher Sanskrit words was equivalent to making the dumb speak and the blind paint. It was beyond their abilities. Even Eastern Emperor Tai and Yasemin also cast Zen strange looks. Then again, they did not know much about what happened on the other shore after they got trapped, so they did not know that Zen had such a skill. I'm not sure if I can understand, but I can try, said Zen. What if perhaps the treacherous beings did not talk in Sanskrit? If so, the heavenly obsession civilization naturally couldn't decipher them. Still, he began to communicate with the heavenly obsession civilization. However, he didn't dare let the heavenly obsession civilization listen directly to the whales. Instead, he transmitted the sound he heard into his inner world. Once the civilization artifact of the heavenly obsession civilization was ready, it began to decipher the chants. At the same time, the core of the heavenly obsession civilization on the upper ice field of the blooming jade stage began to operate like mad. This time, it took longer to decipher the words. After quite a while, a voice came out from the civilization artifact. They are indeed speaking Sanskrit, it stated. Then what are they talking about? Zen asked hurriedly. Most of the sounds are meaningless. Perhaps they are scriptures used in a kind of ceremony, and they recite them over and over again, answered the civilization artifact. Some scriptures. In all honesty, he was a little disappointed. Just then, the civilization artifact added, in addition to those meaningless scriptures, there is also a sentence within them. He immediately perked up upon hearing those words. What is it? He asked again. They have been calling out, come back quickly, as if one of them went missing. They continually repeat the words so the missing would return, the civilization artifact said. Chapter 3578, Revive. Come back quickly. Since the heavenly obsession civilization heard this sentence from the whales of the treacherous beings, it meant that they were indeed using Sanskrit. But who were they calling for? How is it going? Do you understand what they are talking about? The snake goddess asked while Zen was in deep concentration. I can't understand most of the sounds. They seem to be some kind of scripture. Zen paused, realizing everyone was looking at him. Of all the warriors present, only the Wing King, Fuxi, and the snake goddess believed that Zen could understand Sanskrit words. Fuxi and the snake goddess knew what happened in the blooming jade stage, and since the Wing King and a civilization artifact in Zen's body were bound together, he was also aware of it. Others remained skeptical, including Eastern Emperor Tai. He and Yasemin had just been rescued and did not have enough time to know about the current situation. Are they reciting only scriptures? Fuxi asked. In addition to the scriptures, they also seem to be calling for a companion to return, Zen said admittedly. Really? Are you sure you didn't mishear? Pearson chuckled beside him. The Eternal Realm hunters didn't believe Zen's words at all. Looking at his seemingly serious expression, they assumed that Zen was talking nonsense. Zen dismissed Pearson's sarcastic words. He shook his head and said, "No, I'm sure about what I heard. The core of the heavenly obsession civilization didn't decipher without any basis. There were only two results of the deciphering: either it was unable to decipher, or it deciphered every word accurately. Since the core of the heavenly obsession civilization had deciphered it, the information should be correct." "You are so confident," Thurston said as his eyes glimmered. "That's it. They indeed lost one companion, so they keep calling for their companion to return," the snake goddess suddenly concluded. Pearson questioned, "You don't know much about the treacherous beings, and you just passed the winding road by luck. How could you be so certain?" Pearson could tell that Fuxi and the snake goddess were inexperienced in dealing with the treacherous beings. They had just hidden in the thatched hut in the past and snuck away after 3 days when the treacherous beings disappeared. In comparison, Pearson had personally witnessed the treacherous beings in the Supreme Pure Realm. He believed that he understood the treacherous beings better than everyone. The snake goddess smiled slightly, reading between the lines of his words. "There are 200 thatched huts here. In the past, every thatched hut had a treacherous being inside, totaling 200 treacherous beings. Now, there are only 199 of them. That means one is missing, and a thatched hut is vacant," she said as she pointed to the ground, referring to where they were all staying. It was the vacant thatched hut. The reason why the winding road had been difficult to pass was that treacherous beings were something no one could resist. Many Eternal Realm warriors and non-human creatures chose to walk this path, but no matter the number, they all had been annihilated. This made the winding road notorious for its cruelty. Now, there was a treacherous being missing from the winding road. A thatched hut had become empty. They had used this loophole to pass through the winding road. Hearing the snake goddess explanation, Pearson immediately comprehended. He looked at Zen with enlightenment. Zen actually could understand Sanskrit words. Just as Zen said, they are calling for their companion to return. If that treacherous being returns, wouldn't we be in trouble? King Yayan suddenly asked. It had not been back for so many years. What are the odds that it would come back today? Fuxi answered, rolling his eyes at it. The snake goddess and Fuxi previously had this concern. The two of them were nervous when they couldn't find the empty thatched hut, but now there was no need to worry. For 20 hours, everyone still had their hearing completely shut. They couldn't hear anything. While Zen, on the other hand, continued to listen attentively to the chants. The core of the heavenly obsession civilization had been working as well, trying its best to decipher even a little information for Zen. However, these treacherous beings behaved stubbornly. For nearly 20 hours, they had been reciting the scriptures with only a little communication between them. Dawn came at the end of the last hour. A faint light peeped from outside the thatched hut. The strange treacherous beings all returned inside of their own thatched hut. They started to communicate while Zen successfully decoded the communication part by part. A treacherous being started walking towards Zen and his group's thatched hut. The treacherous being's footsteps approached, with everyone becoming more anxious as they felt it getting closer and closer. "What should we do?" King Yayan panicked. The snake goddess made a gesture, warning it not to use spiritual sense to communicate with others in case they would be discovered by the treacherous beings. She walked carefully to the edge of the thatched hut. When the treacherous being was about to lift the edge, the snake goddess grabbed it, forcing it to shut. The treacherous being failed to open it, eventually giving up after several tries. The treacherous being turned around to look for another thatched hut instead. It walked further from them, putting everyone's heart at ease. They sighed in relief. Soon, the sky revealed its full brightness. The snake goddess told everyone to recover their hearing and opened the thatched hut. Everyone walked out the thatched hut one by one. 20 hours inside such a small space had left them in discomfort. They lifted their arms and bent their bodies to stretch. "Staying on this road for 3 days and directly entering the Supreme Pure Realm is the easiest thing we've done in history," Pearson said with confidence. "I remember the first time we entered the Supreme Pure Realm, half of us died." Thurston sentimentally recalled. The Eternal Realm hunters were all elites, but even they had to pay a huge price in going to the Supreme Pure Realm. While everyone was breathing and enjoying the fresh air, the snake goddess found that Zen's face was a little gloomy. "Zen, what's wrong?" Everyone turned their glances, once again focusing on him. After hesitating for a moment, Zen asked, "Is it really impossible to kill the treacherous beings?" "Yes, it's impossible to kill them," Pearson quickly answered. "Even if they get killed, they will still come back to life. They can't disappear from the world. The treacherous beings were the real indestructible existences in the three purities stage. What exactly did you hear again? The snake goddess asked. The treacherous beings exchanged a few words before they went into the thatched huts. Their companion is trapped outside the winding road, which seems to be the supreme pure realm, Zen replied. It might have been trapped there for many years. Fuxi nodded. But the trapped treacherous being has been killed recently. They are trying to find a way to revive it, and they would do it tonight. Zen continued. Everyone fell silent upon hearing his statement. The snake goddess stared at Zen nervously. Are you sure? I'm afraid so, Zen agreed. King Yayan interrupted. If that treacherous being comes back to life, doesn't that mean there won't be any vacant thatched hut? The snake goddess and Fuxi shared a dull aura, their faces darkening in fear. One more treacherous being meant that they would lose their hiding place. If the treacherous beings discovered them, they would definitely be attacked. Everyone could die. Do we still have a chance to retreat? Eastern Emperor Tai asked as his face turned into a frown. If we quit the winding road before the duration of 3 days ends, we will not be able to enter the Supreme Pure Realm, nor could we return to the Grand Pure Realm. We will only be lost in the plane where we can never turn back, the snake goddess said. What should we do now? Yasmin asked, her face flooded with worry. The snake goddess glanced at the thatched huts. The only way now is to kill another treacherous being, she firmly declared. Chapter 3579, A Hard Choice. Zen and his companions were in great trouble at that point. If the treacherous being came back to life and couldn't find its thatched hut, it would hunt them down. It was most likely that 200 treacherous beings would probably come for them. Furthermore, treacherous beings' strengths only gave them a slim chance of survival. Had it been one treacherous being, perhaps they might still make it. The snake goddess's idea might work. Are you sure you want to fight a treacherous being? Pearson sniffed. Or what? Should we surrender to them instead? Fuxi asked darkly. I did not mean to look down on you, Pearson said indifferently. There was once a race called the Primal Tiger Race, in the Grand Pure Realm. They were so powerful that even the element spirit civilization never dared to provoke them. We were lucky enough to befriend them, he continued. Although the Eternal Realm hunters usually traveled alone, they did have some friends in the Three Purities stage. For instance, the Primal Tiger Race was on friendly terms with the Eternal Realm hunters. In the past, when dozens of members of the Primal Tiger Race fell into a poisonous well, it was the Eternal Realm hunters who had saved them. Due to immense gratitude, the Primal Tiger Race had promised to protect the Eternal Realm hunters forever. After that, the Eternal Realm hunters turned to the Primal Tiger Race whenever they were in peril. That was how they escaped their end several times. However, a single treacherous being slaughtered such a strong race that not even the element spirit civilization dared to instigate. Back then, the Eternal Realm hunters were also in the tribe of the Primal Tiger Race. They didn't take the treacherous being seriously at first since they thought that the mighty Primal Tiger Race would deal with it. Even when the Ice Spirit had personally visited the Primal Tiger Race to ask for the Eternal Realm hunters, they just drove him away. Therefore, who else in the Three Purities stage posed any threat to them? Soon enough, the Eternal Realm hunters found that they were very wrong. Simply put, the treacherous being's power was far beyond their imagination. At that time, the Eternal Realm hunters had only gotten a glimpse of the treacherous being. It was a continually changing spirit. After the treacherous being broke into the tribe, it immediately exploded and unleashed blood-red flames that had spread in all directions. As a result, the vast majority of the Primal Tiger Race did not have a chance to escape at all, and the red flames swallowed them. The Eternal Realm hunters stayed on the edge of the tribe's territory. When they saw the spread of red flames, they quickly fled into the distance, but the red flames still slaughtered 3 of them. Even though one of the victims had only barely brushed against the flames, he seemed to have suffered the worst curse in the world. His body crumpled, and his soul turned gray. He faded away each passing day. The others infused their life energies into him but to no avail. In the end, he had died miserably after several months of struggle and torture. From then on, the Eternal Realm hunters finally understood the real power of the treacherous beings. After Pearson finished his story, Eastern Emperor Tai, Yasmin, King Yayan, the Snake Goddess, and even Fuxi, all shared dark looks. The Snake Goddess and Fuxi knew that the treacherous beings were horrible creatures, but this was beyond their expectations. So what should we do? Do we have no chance of survival at all? Asked Eastern Emperor Tai. If the treacherous beings were surely that powerful, they could not fight back. I don't think all of them are as strong as the one in the story. We may still have a way to deal with them, Zen suddenly said. What made you think that? Eastern Emperor Tai asked. Someone must have used a special method to drive that treacherous being off and sent it to the Supreme Pure Realm, Zen said as he pointed at the thatched huts in the distance. It was clear that a treacherous being in the winding road would not leave the place for no reason. Thus, someone must have found a way to lure it to the Supreme Pure Realm. Since someone had managed to do that, they could also deal with a treacherous being if they did find a way. I agree, someone must have driven the treacherous being away. If we try, maybe we'll also have a chance, the snake goddess said. Then, Thurston asked, Zen, are you sure that treacherous being will come back to life tonight? Zen shook his head. I'm not completely sure about that. I heard the other treacherous beings discuss that they would bring it back to life tonight, but it does not mean that they'll manage to do so, he answered. Upon hearing his explanation, everyone became hesitant. It seemed that the chances of the treacherous being's rebirth were not high, but once it came back to life, death and destruction would follow. On the other hand, if they took the initiative to kill another treacherous being first, it was not an easy feat at all. They remained stuck in a dilemma. At that moment, the Wing King, who usually did not speak much, abruptly said, Don't pin your hopes on others. Losing the initiative is equivalent to waiting passively to be killed. The regal Jade civilization had placed their hopes on the Nihility race in the past, as they thought that the enemies would pull their punches. In the end, the regal Jade civilization had met a tragic end. You're right, once the night falls, we'll have no more chances to fight back, Fuxi said with a nod. Meanwhile, King Yayan looked at Thurston and Sawyer, then said, You can summon the powerful Black Sun, right? If you can pull a treacherous being into the Black Sun, then killing it won't be that hard, right? It was true that the Black Sun had severe limitations, but it was useful when it came to individual enemies. Well, we can try, Thurston agreed. In fact, he already thought of that idea, and that was why he had asked Zen the question. Each treacherous being has a different level of strength. We still have enough time. We need to find out the easiest opponent, Pearson stated. Fortunately, daytime in the winding road was 12 hours long, so they had sufficient time to prepare before nightfall. Of course, the task of choosing their opponent fell on the augury dog, who was the most sensitive to powers. He could sense the level of threat of each enemy, which was associated with their strength. A few leaves gently rustled on the ground as the augury dog ran past each of the thatched huts and sniffed them one by one. Every time he passed by a thatched hut, his eyes became filled with fear. However, he went to the next thatched hut without hesitation. Not long after, he had examined over 100 thatched huts. When only 3 huts remained, the augury dog stopped before one of the huts and said in a low voice, This one. This one is the weakest among them all. The thatched hut he referred to was isolated from the rest. Still, it emanated a threatening aura. Then again, it was indeed a little weaker compared to the other treacherous beings. Get ready, Fuxi said to the 3 Eternal Realm Hunters. The 3 Eternal Realm Hunters had decided their divisions of labor. Pearson was responsible for subduing the treacherous being, while Thurston and Sawyer would pull it into the Black Sun. If everything went well, the whole ordeal would only take them a short while. Now, the others retreated to a safe distance and formed a circle to deal with emergencies. Finally, they shut off their hearing, then Thurston and Sawyer summoned the Black Sun. At that point, Pearson turned into a spider web and blocked the front of the thatched hut. Who will open the thatched hut for us? Sawyer asked. His question met silence. Everyone looked reluctant to do the dangerous task. I'll do it, Zen said in a resolute voice. He walked straight to the thatched hut, grabbed a corner of the flap, and slowly lifted it. The whole village in the vast, white mist was unusually quiet, to the point that everyone heard their heartbeats clearly. When Zen had lifted more than half of the flap, they all saw a strange thing that lay on the ground. It looked like a mass of white liquid, but it had limbs and a head. It also had 2 black hollows on its head. Everyone felt afraid when they looked into the holes. So this is a treacherous being. Is it asleep? Its aura feels depressing. Without the thatched hut as a barrier, they were now face to face with the treacherous being. The air around it felt so uncomfortable, and it overwhelmed them even more. It appeared that the treacherous being was the nemesis of all living beings. They couldn't help but feel instinctively fearful in front of it. Zen took a few steps back and nodded at the Eternal Realm Hunters, which signaled them to get started. Chapter 3580, Possessed by the Treacherous Being. The treacherous being was not on guard at all and seemed to have fallen asleep. Very few people had ever dared to venture into the winding road since ancient times. Not many were brave enough to challenge the treacherous beings after all. Nobody ever came through here, thus the treacherous beings did not see the need to be so vigilant. Hiss, hiss, hiss. One by one, long, thin threads crept up towards the treacherous being. Extremely thin to the point of weightlessness, these spider threads felt no more than specks of dust upon the body of the treacherous being. Soon enough, these threads covered the creature in its entirety. Every single square inch was tightly wrapped by the spider threads. Swoosh! The black sun in front of Thurston and Sawyer began to spin just as a strong attraction force burst forth from it. As this strong attraction force came out, it headed straight towards the treacherous being and dragged it directly out of the thatched hut. Its body was soft, liquid, and had the consistency of water. It had since lost its shape and had turned into something that resembled a mass of sticky glue. Whoosh! With no struggle on the part of the treacherous being, it was quickly and flawlessly sucked into the black sun. It was only then that Thurston and Sawyer separated and the black sun promptly disappeared. If one thought about it, it was actually quite amazing. A horrible treacherous being was dealt with in such a short amount of time and with no sort of violent struggle whatsoever. Eastern Emperor Tai had to voice out his question through spiritual sense. Has the treacherous being been sucked in? Yasmin nodded. I suppose. The Wing King then took his chance to slowly withdraw his wings. An open space was necessary to deal with a treacherous being. If it ever let out a howl to call out its companions, the Wing King would use the space to block off any sound, if it could block it at all. With their purpose served, the spider threads retreated and reformed into Pearson's body. You two should separate further, he ordered Sawyer and Thurston. The black sun had never failed them until then, of course. Even if the treacherous being was sucked into the black sun, it was best to be careful. What if it turned out that the treacherous being shared Zen's ability? What if, like the young man, it could also forcibly gather the separated black sun? If that was the case, then things would be very bad for all of them. Sawyer and Thurston did as Pearson ordered and walked further in the opposite direction of each other. However, Sawyer had only taken a few steps when a white mass suddenly emerged from his back. It was the sticky body of the treacherous being. Pearson was quick to point out this horrifying mass. Sawyer, he roared in warning. In a fit of desperation, he had forgotten that everyone had destroyed their hearing and only Zen heard what he said. Sawyer had no idea what was currently on his back and of the warnings Pearson yelled at him. The white mass of goo gradually bulged and extended its body on top of Sawyer's head. Then two hollow eyes appeared. There was no denying that the treacherous being had used some kind of technique to escape the black sun before it closed. Up there, above your head, the snake goddess warned Sawyer through spiritual sense. Her words were firm, but unlike Pearson, she knew how to use her head. Panic in their current situation was never a good thing. When Sawyer raised his head, he immediately paled. How could this be? This thing had attached itself onto his back. The treacherous being was a mass of goo and looked like a slug as it crawled on Sawyer's back. Anyone would get goosebumps just imagining it. When Sawyer turned his head, the treacherous being took the chance and planted itself on his face. Swish, swish, swish. The orifices on Sawyer's face were enough for the treacherous being to enter his body. In the blink of an eye, the mass of goo was gone and had completely entered Sawyer. Sawyer, no, Thurston screamed. A sudden rage erupted from deep inside him when he saw what happened. However, along with the anger came fear. Everything happened so fast, there was no time to react, much less help Sawyer. With the treacherous being now inside him, Sawyer's pupils suddenly rolled back and he stood completely still. The people around him immediately stepped back, eager to keep their distance. To everyone's horror, Sawyer turned towards Zen and opened his mouth. He was going to start howling. Buzz! There was a flash of green light as the Wing King spread his wings and formed a protective dome above all of them. Fuxie and the snake goddess could only look up in desperate hopes that Sawyer's howls wouldn't wake up the other treacherous beings. Everyone waited with bated breath to see if the protective dome would do its job. It works, they all exclaimed when they saw the thatched huts remain quiet. To say that they were relieved would be an understatement. They couldn't be too sure if the space the Wing King conjured completely blocked Sawyer's howls, but it proved to be enough since none of the other treacherous beings stirred from their slumber. However, they still had a problem. Zen, can you understand what it's saying? The snake goddess asked him through spiritual sense as the treacherous being continued to howl. It is being deciphered, he replied. Since the black sun's space failed to trap this treacherous being, then this situation had now truly become extremely troublesome. Should we kill it? Fuxie asked. Thurston was quick to shake his head. No, of course not, he exclaimed. Sawyer was his brother and there was no way he would be willing to kill him. Thurston would rather kill himself than hurt his brother. What should we do then? Fuxi asked. This situation wasn't exactly ideal. A treacherous being's strength was unfathomable, and even if the warriors had an advantage, victory remained slippery. If they waited until the treacherous being began to attack them, they would be forced into a passive state. I don't care what we do, but anyone who hurts my brother will be my enemy, Thurston declared as he shot Fuxi a cold glare. It was obvious that keeping his brother safe and sound was non-negotiable. Calm down, Thurston. You must remember, that person is no longer Sawyer. Pearson reminded him. There were so many monsters in the Three Purities stage that had the ability of possession. The soul-killing flame, for instance, was one of these creatures. It existed in the Grand Pure Realm and could possess one's body if a warrior was not too careful. The soul leech in the blood swamp of the Supreme Pure Realm was another example. A warrior could already be considered dead the moment these creatures possessed their body. Since the treacherous being was infinitely more terrifying than those things, then how could they ever hope for Sawyer's survival? He was no more than a corpse now. Thurston shook his head in denial. But, he stammered and watched as his brother, who had previously been content with howling, suddenly rushed towards Zen. We need to act now, Fuxi declared. Without any hesitation, he stretched out his hand and pressed it onto the ground. A mark of 8 diagrams promptly appeared on top of Sawyer's head. In his determination to take down Sawyer, Fuxi exerted his full strength onto this attack. Just as Fuxi's attack came down upon the young man, Sawyer suddenly pointed up and touched the mark of 8 diagrams. To everyone's surprise, it shattered with a loud bang. The attack, backed by Fuxi's full strength, was broken by Sawyer so casually. Swish, swish, swish. The snake goddess also went on the offensive and stretched out her shadow's densely packed tentacles to wrap around Sawyer. Meanwhile, King Yayan, Eastern Emperor Tai, and Yasmin got busy with using their own unique skills. Underneath this green space, the collection of powerful energy and the pressure it released was terrifying. Any ordinary creature would tremble in fear. Unfortunately, the thing that possessed Sawyer was far from ordinary. The treacherous being had an incredible ability that dissipated any sort of energy sent to harm it. When Zen saw Sawyer rush towards him, his eyes immediately flashed with determination. Instead of a retreat, he decided to face his opponent head-on. Eager to take on the offensive, Zen lowered his body and threw a solid punch towards Sawyer's head. Da! Since his body had been transformed by the ancestry-level bloodline, it was a given that the power of his punch would be extremely terrifying. However, instead of the devastating results Zen expected, Sawyer merely stretched out his finger and pointed it to his fist. The moment their hands touched, Zen's power completely dissipated. His pupils widened and he immediately jumped back in retreat. What the? No, retreat, retreat. Unfortunately, that was no longer an option. Sawyer was fast and immediately grabbed hold of Zen's fist. He didn't seem to exert that much strength, but Zen found himself unable to break free of his hold. Rumble, rumble, rumble. At that moment, a stream of white goo emerged from the orifices of Sawyer's face. It was the treacherous being's body. Soon enough, Zen found himself face to face with the treacherous being's hollow eyes and its strange smile. It looked at him up and down before suddenly jumping onto his face and into his body the same way it entered Sawyer.